Okay, we're going to get started. Today is Tuesday, September 5th, 2023. This is the City Council's regular meeting. I am calling it to order. Notice is given to the members of the City Council and to the general public that at this regular meeting, the City Council may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public, for discussion and consultation with the city's attorneys for legal advice on any item listed on the following agenda. Can I have roll call?
Mayor Daggett.
Here.
Vice Mayor Aslan.
Present.
Councilmember Harris. Here. Councilmember House.
Here.
Councilmember Matthews.
Here.
Councilmember McCarthy.
I'm here.
Councilmember Sweet. Here.
Vice Mayor, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you. Please stand.
Councilmember McCarthy, our mission statement.
Yes, Mayor. The mission of the City of Flagstaff is to protect and enhance the quality of life for all.
Councilmember House, our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mayor. The Flagstaff City Council humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by Native descendants, border mountains sacred to indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this place as home.
Thank you. All right, we're moving down to public participation. This enables the public to address the council about an item that is not on the agenda. Comments relating to items that are on the agenda will be taken at the time that the item is discussed. You can pick up cards at the back of the room, and you have 3 minutes. There is a timer here, and the council is not able to address you back or ask any questions. So first we have Tia Hatton.
All right. Hi, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Council. My name is Tia Hatton, and I'm a Sustainability Coordinator with the city. In my role, I am also the staff liaison to the Sustainability Commission. I began with the city in May, so it's great to meet those of you who I haven't yet. This is a brief informational update on the Neighborhood Sustainability Grant Program. The City of Flagstaff Sustainability Office and Sustainability Commission are pleased to announce that the annual application period for the Neighborhood Sustainability Grant Program is open now through September 30th. This year, the grant program, which is funded through the environmental management fee, has a total of $75,000. Applicants are eligible for awards up to $7,500 towards their community sustainability projects in the areas of food, waste, climate action, resilience, building energy, transportation, and public health. Right now, I have a short video to share with you about the grant program.
Are you in need of funding for that amazing sustainability project you have in mind?
The City of Flagstaff Sustainability Commission and the Sustainability Office invite local organizations, individuals, and businesses to apply for a neighborhood sustainability grant.
Awards up to $7,500 are available for community sustainability projects that fall into the following categories:
Food, waste, climate action, transportation, resilience, building energy, and public health.
The application period for this grant is from September 1st to the 30th, 2023. The grant guidelines, application materials, and project ideas can be found on our website.
We're very excited to see your community sustainability projects come to life.
Thank you. This Thursday, we will be hosting a grant workshop with our partners in beautification, arts, and sciences from 5:30 to 7 p.m. in person at the Sustainability Office and over Microsoft Teams. All grant materials and the grant workshop registration can be found on our website at www.flagstaff.az.gov/NSG. We would love your support in sharing information about this grant opportunity with our community. And I will follow up with you shortly with an informational email. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill Stevenson.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members, I am delighted to hear what the Sustainability Department is working on. I think that's a real step in the right direction. And we just heard about the home energy retrofit program. I think that's another great thing that the city is doing, because we are in the midst of a climate emergency. And every decision you make should be based on that premise. Scientists are telling us we need to wean ourselves from fossil fuels as quickly as possible. And there are a variety of ways to do that. One is for the city and the county and the school district and NAU and Mountain Line to convert their fleet vehicles to electric vehicles as quickly as possible. And I know you are all proceeding in that direction, but too slowly. Mountain Line especially, I think, is doing a very good job on this. We need to encourage people to take public transportation. And again, that's encouraging that Mountain Line is doing what they're doing to electrify their fleets of vehicles. We also need to encourage making bicycling and walking safer. We have a reputation as a city as being bicycle safe, but I've talked with so many people, residents and out-of-town people, who say, maybe compared to some other cities, we are bicycle safe, but not really safe enough. And the same goes for pedestrians. So I'm urging you, because of the power that you have in every decision you make, to keep in mind that we are in a climate emergency. And the faster we move, the more chance we have of mitigating the effects of climate change. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Tanya Bustamante.
Good afternoon. I'm Tanya Bustamante. Thank you for having me. This is the first time I've done this on a whim. I was just walking through, so thank you for having me, Mayor and Vice Mayor. So I am from Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and I'm here to just give a quick intro to us. We are now here in Flagstaff, thanks to the Governor of Highway Safety Office for granting us a full-time position here in Flagstaff that will be attending different public forums, such as this, and working with PDs here in a higher scale, and also with the high schools is one of our main focuses, educating them on underage drinking, fentanyl use, marijuana, and distracted driving with new drivers out there. Also, we want to educate the freshmen, incoming freshmen at NAU. I think that's very important. And we also offer victim services free of charge. All of this is amongst other things that we do here at MAD. So this is just a quick intro again, and wanted to make sure that you guys were aware that we're here. Ethan Quinn will be the point person and the full-time person here at in Flagstaff. What we ask of you is just your support. We will be trying to meet with superintendents, high school principals, different health classes that we would like to attend, offer them our expertise in underage drinking education. I think that's what we're going to start with first off in Flagstaff. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that you were just passing by. Okay, moving down to item number 5, council liaison reports. Let's start with Councilmember Matthews.
I don't have anything at this time.
Councilmember House.
Nothing from my commissions, but I will share that, last week, many of us were able to attend the Lee Conference, and the sessions that I attended primarily focused on housing and community engagement. There were a lot of highlighted discussions about innovative housing policies that are helping communities grapple with local, affordable, and attainable housing challenges. And I was able to just take a moment and share with our housing team how encouraging it was to see how many of those centered on actions that have been established in our 10-year housing plan. Knowing that we still have a long way to go in a lot of these efforts, it was still encouraging to see that we're on that right path and actually setting some of those initiatives. As well as I attended a couple sessions that had a lot of good information on cultural engagement and enhancing the cultural economy of communities by engaging and partnering with arts and cultural organizations. So that was a really interesting highlight of the conference this year, and I look forward to bringing some of that back for our community.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris.
I have nothing at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you guys notice that I've mixed it up as to how I usually do it? Okay. Councilmember Sweet.
Nothing tonight.
Vice Mayor.
I had a lot to share last week. Not much to add this week other than the wonderful Arizona League of Cities and Towns events that we participated in all week long. Good.
Councilmember McCarthy.
Did you do that just to make me last?
I
All
saved the
kidding
best for
aside,
last.
This Thursday is a Metro Plan Executive Board meeting, and I might mention, just to kind of tie into some things we just heard in the last 10 minutes, that one of the things we're going to be discussing is I don't know if it's a day or a week, but getting people to try to see if they can not drive their car for a week or a few days and use public transit, walk, bicycle, and that's kind of an interesting thing that ties into what a lot of people are interested in. Thank you.
Thank you. And I too gave a lengthy update last week, so I have nothing. So let's move down to appointments. Let's see who is first. Councilmember House. We are making 4 appointments to the Commission on Inclusion and Adaptive Living, and all terms expire March 2026.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, just wanted to express gratitude to those who applied. And it was very clear that all 4 of the applicants this time around have a clear valuing of inclusiveness in our community. I was particularly compelled by the work of my appointee and encourage the rest of council to take a look at the Welcome Here organization that's doing work here in Flagstaff. They have a strong focus on inclusivity and access for all in our community, which is definitely a worthwhile conversation for us to continue engaging in. So with that, I would like to nominate Susan Purrington to an appointment term expiring March 2026.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Councilmember Harris. I can go to the next person, right? Even if it's on the agenda as Councilmember Harris?
That is completely up to you and Councilmember Harris. If she wants to defer, you bet.
All right, let's go to Councilmember Sweet.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to nominate Keith Becker to a term expiring March 2026.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. And next up is me. So I will nominate Michelle Eisenberg for a term expiring March 2026.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Would you like to take a break? Let's take a let's take a 5-minute break. We are getting started again. We are still on item number 6A. We have one more appointment to make to the Commission on Inclusion and Adaptive Living. And I believe that Councilmember Harris has a nomination.
Yes, I do, and I just want to apologize to everyone about that. So I would like to nominate Russell Randall for a term ending, which year did you say? March 2026.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So, moving down, to consent items. So all matters under the consent agenda are considered by the City Council to be routine and will be enacted by one motion approving the recommendations listed on the agenda. Unless otherwise indicated, expenditures approved by council are budgeted items. So we have items A through H. Are there any items that a council member would like to pull out and discuss separately? All right. Yes?
I didn't want to pull it, but I did want to just highlight item F, just because it's apropos to what we're talking about tonight with the update on the 10-year housing plan, and just note for the community that it's providing over $900,000 in ARPA funding for housing assistance projects that include starter homes, homeless outreach, housing sustainability, or housing stability, and eviction prevention programming. Thanks.
Thanks for doing that. All right, can I have a motion?
Mayor, I move to approve all of the consent items, item 7, A through H.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Moving down to item 8A. This is a public hearing item, and there is no action this evening, only a public hearing. So I am going to open the public hearing, and I do not believe that we have any or do we have a presentation from staff? Okay, and then if there is any public comment after that, we will take it. And then if council members have any questions that they need answered, we can do that as well. Hello and welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Okay. Good afternoon. Alexandra Pucciarelli, current planning manager. So I'm here today to talk about the Live Timber Sky annexation. This is a required public hearing to meet state statute, and we're going to just be focusing on the annexation. You'll get to see me again next week for a work session, the following week for the first read of the ordinance for the annexation and a rezoning, and then 2 weeks later, you'll get to see me again for the second read of those ordinances, as well as the plan is a resolution for a development agreement. So we'll start tonight, nice and easy on the annexation. So Vintage Partners and Live Communities are requesting to annex approximately 1.82 acres. This is located at the corner of Woody Mountain and West 66. At the same time, concurrently, they're requesting a rezoning of the entire parcel. Only a corner of it is actually in the county. Here you can see that project site. To the north of this is our public works yard. To the west is the Timber Sky subdivision. To the south, Sky Cottages that somewhat recently came in for a rezoning. And kind of to the southeast is the Presidio development. So here I outlined the parcel in question in red, and then I drew this blue line, which indicates the county area. So you could see it kind of wraps around the public works yard and kind of hangs down and hits this little corner, which is zoned G. I'm pointing at this, sorry. Can you all, there. So that little corner is zoned general under the county. So this is the area that we're requesting to annex in to make that parcel whole. I went ahead and included some information about the development. That's not really a consideration so much when we're annexing, but just for your information and any questions, information for the public. So they will be requesting once, if this gets annexed, it'll come in under our rural residential zoning. And then they'll have to do a rezoning request to rezone the entire parcel to high-density residential with that resource protection overlay. Their intent is to develop multifamily residential and then associated parking and amenities for that development.
Could you speak briefly to, so many parcels within the city limits are rural residential, and according to our, all the planning that the city has done with the residents of Flagstaff, that is not a desirable zone to have in the city limits. Are you able to even speak to that briefly?
I'm willing to give it a shot. So rural residential is a very low-density zone. Previously, I believe it was referred to as like the holding zone. It was the idea that you would bring in more rural property from the county designated as rural residential with the idea of eventually rezoning it to something with more potential, more density. So rural residential, I believe, has a density range of like 1 unit per acre. So if we're going through the trouble of providing city infrastructure, water, sewer, it makes a lot more sense and a lot more efficiency to have a greater density than that 1 unit an acre. Okay. So this talks a little bit about that proposed density. So in comparison to what we just talked about, that 1 unit an acre, the high-density residential would allow between 10 to 29 units an acre. So a big difference there. I don't want to get too much into this because we'll talk about the rezoning in the future. But this development is proposing 214 units, and that gets us a density of about 16.45 units an acre. Just for your information, I broke out the unit types. These are very traditional unit styles, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom, not this ratio of 1 bedroom per bathroom, a lot more sort of what I consider traditional household type design. The site plan review was approved by staff on June 30th of this year, subject to that direct-to-ordinance rezoning. I've included some proposed floor plans just so you could see the types of buildings they're proposing. This is a 3-story building. It includes garages on the bottom floor and 24 units. I went ahead and highlighted them in red on that small sort of plan over there on the right. This is the elevation of that, so very kind of traditional Flagstaff look of the pitched roofs, the stone veneer, the sidings. This is another building type. It's just a smaller version of what we saw before. 3 stories, only 12 units. These elevations. And then building type 3 has a garages on the first floor and units on the second. There's 5 of these over on the west edge of this. And that's what they look like. So the annexation request is to annex approximately 1.82 acres. It's a portion of a parcel 112-01-712, which is 13.01 acres. I think it's important to note that when this project started and they first put in an application, it had a different APN number. So prior to January of this year, it had this 019B APN number. So you will notice inconsistencies throughout the attachments and the reports because in the beginning we were dealing with one APN, it switched halfway, and I just need to go through and consistently make sure we're all talking about the same APN. So if you have any questions about, are we talking about the same? Yes, we're talking about the same piece of land, the same request. It's just that switch in the APN. So when we're looking at annexations, we have required findings, and they have to do with compliance with state statute, compliance with our regional plan, as well as compliance with our impact analyses that we do. So finding number 1 is conformance with Arizona state statute. It sets up criteria for what properties may be annexed, the required processes and procedures, and sets up that what zone that property would come into the city under. Finding number 2 is conformance with our regional plan. Our regional plan has a couple policies that directly talk about annexation. One is that that should be annexed prior to the provision of city services, or that we have a pre-annexation agreement. The other has to do with our urban growth boundary, that we want to focus on annexing properties that are within that growth boundary. Our third finding is conformance with a city code. We looked at a traffic impact analysis, water, sewer, stormwater, schools, and fire. So for the traffic, a traffic impact analysis was dated June 9th. It was accepted by city staff and approved by ADOT. Route 66 along the north of this is actually ADOT jurisdiction. Transportation improvements, and I'll probably go into this more when we get to the rezoning, but it has to do with providing turn lanes, extending the median on Woody Mountain Road, and providing fees in lieu towards the traffic signal. We also did, there was a water and sewer impact analysis done back in 2013. The WISA, the water sewer impact analysis, got waived on September 20th of 2022. Right now, I believe they're required to do a 12-inch off-site sewer main. A lot of this will be covered when we talk about the development agreement. We've been working closely with Water Services on what they'll be required to do. The stormwater analysis was done. They did a drainage impact analysis that was prepared on August 30th. No off-site stormwater improvements are required. They have on-site retention to mitigate the increase of runoffs from the new impervious surface. Schools, there was no anticipated effect on the local school district. And for fire, it's served by Fire Station 1, which is down the road to the east on Thompson, and it's close enough, it's within that designated response, or the desired response time. As far as citizen participation, the applicant held 2 neighborhood meetings, one in the beginning of December and then one kind of after the holiday rush of, they did one in February. 18 people attended the first one, 4 attended the second. Staff has not received any public comments on this to date. So the Planning and Zoning Commission made a recommendation that in accordance with the findings, that we forward the annexation request to City Council with a recommendation of approval. Tonight, as I said, we're just holding the public hearing. September 19th, we'll do the ordinance as well as the rezoning ordinance. And then October 3rd, we'll do the second read and the DA. And that's all I have. And I know, I believe the applicant was going to be joining us online, but they don't have a presentation or anything.
Does the applicant have anything to add? All right, and I don't see any public comment. And we've got some questions from council. And then if the applicant, if it turns out that the applicant does have something that he would like to add, we can take that after questions. So, Councilmember Matthews and Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Some of this is just to bring me up to speed on how this all works. But my first question is, why did we waive the WISA?
I believe that the WISA was waived. That is a decision made by Water Services, not planning. But my understanding is that a previous WISA was done for a very similar multifamily development on this site, and that staff didn't see the need to redo all that work, that it would end up with the same results of what was required. Keep in mind, this area too has seen a lot of development, so there's a lot of new pipes in the ground. So I think it was deemed unnecessary at the time to redo that.
So my next question is there a population number that then changes the need to add another fire station? Because there's a lot of development down there. So is there a benchmark to once we get X amount of more houses, we'll have to add that? Is that a formula that's out there?
I'm not sure. That would be a question for the fire department. My understanding is that they looked at this and that they determined it was not necessary at this time. But I mean, theoretically, I think there would have to be a point where it was determined we need more coverage, but I don't think that point's been reached.
Okay, and then I've had a lot of community comments to me personally about the need for a light signal. And I'm told that because it's ADOT, that they determine that. And I've struggled with our traffic impact study process. We're allowing these houses to be built. Already, people who live off that, in that area feel that it's getting more and more dangerous to cross traffic to turn into their neighborhood. Can you just speak a little bit on that? Like, do we have any say in putting that traffic signal light in?
So my understanding is that engineering staff, our traffic section, will work with applicants to determine the scope of any traffic analysis that's done. So they're basically looking at what is your project and how great is sort of the bubble of impact of it. And then that study is done. It is interesting, you know, Flagstaff gets to deal with ADOT quite a bit. You know, ADOT has jurisdiction right through the middle of town. And it is very much a numbers statistical view as opposed to like experiential. I think I deal with a lot of community members who their personal experience of sitting through multiple traffic lights or feeling frustrated and unable to make a left turn is very valid, but that tends to not have such a role in the traffic impact analyses, which can be a little frustrating. I know at like the neighborhood meetings, that was one of the biggest recurring comments that were made, was talking about the traffic light and wanting a traffic light. The developer has expressed, I would love to just build it and put it in. But ADOT has determined it is not yet warranted. And I believe one of the analyses I saw, I thought was putting it at approximately 2 years, but they'll reevaluate it on a regular basis to determine at what point it is warranted. I can certainly, for a lot of your questions, I feel like maybe we can answer more of those questions when we're looking at the ordinance, and I can have staff here who can help answer some of those more specific technical questions, so I'm not just sort of speaking like a traffic
And I appreciate
engineer.
that, and just so that they're prepared, one of the questions that I've received different responses to is, in our jurisdiction, I used to be on a citizen advisory council, and a traffic impact study dictated if the developer had to put in infrastructure, street lights, widening, turn lanes, and I've been told two different answers on whether we actually require or we just do the study to find out the impact. So when we come back to discuss the ordinance, I'm going to ask that question again, and it may not pertain directly to this development if ADOT then has the final say in it, but I think we all suffer with the traffic congestion that we have in town, and I think it's something that needs to be at least clear in my mind. Do we require the developer to put in the infrastructure to handle, or not get the development if the traffic impact is too severe? And so that is something I'd like answered, not from you, but just
Yes.
have them be prepared. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, and then Councilmember McCarthy.
Yeah, just real quick, and I'm sorry if I missed this. I assume the county has a role to play or a process they go through to surrender this land. Want to hear a little bit more about that, get your sense of where they're at in being amenable to this. And just really looking at that map, I don't know if you can pull it back up where you overlaid both the parcel in question
Divert your
and
eyes while
the
I go.
boundaries. Is it worth a conversation on looking at that more generally, going to the top of that blue line and just cutting it across, so that we don't have this weird little finger occurring there? Just a question worth considering since we're already in this. And then talk to me again about the expense that would be incurred by the city of Flagstaff for this, and how much of that specifically would be transferred to the applicant. I want to make sure we're not holding a bill for this, as it were. Maybe just walk me through that a little bit more.
So the state statute that I referenced, finding one, talks about a process. And part of that process is notification of certain positions in the county. So the county has been made aware of this. Staff reaches out, gives them that, the application, so they're aware that the property owner is requesting an annexation. So we work with them through the process. They've not expressed any concerns over this annexation. So hopefully that answers that part. As far as expanding the area of annexation, as much as I'd love to do that, the city is not, we tend not to annex other people's property. We let the property owners come to us with their annexation, and we've certainly talked to property owners about, if you and your neighbors all get together, you could save kind of time and money of the application if you all joined forces. In this instance, because there are multiple property owners, it would be up to them to decide to annex or not. So I wouldn't feel comfortable annexing someone else's property. And
So I'm going off of my memory of the area, which is adequate, but maybe not detailed specifically. It sounds like there are property owners. This isn't just fallow county forest that we're
correct.
talking about. Okay.
Yes.
That helps contextualize things a lot for me. And then, yeah, just, I don't know if this is a process of sale and purchase, and where the dollars and cents come out at the end of that, or if this is just something that's entirely occurring on paper and it doesn't really involve real estate from the sense that I'm expressing.
I believe that the developer currently owns the property. As far as like cost to the city, are you thinking like development costs? Because that goes back into.
No, I'm thinking real estate, but you've already corrected my misunderstanding there. So,
Okay.
yeah, I think I'm good.
Okay.
Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a little follow-up to Ms. Matthews' question about transportation planning. And I mentioned before that this Thursday, Metro Plan, which is the transportation planning organization for this area, not just this area, but, you know, the
Yes.
greater Flagstaff area. Anyway, on the agenda is to talk about a planned planning activity for this corridor. So the idea of stoplights or no stoplights, I'm sure will come up during that. So that kind of covers that point. I had some general comments. Can I make those now too, or? Okay. We hear a lot of talk about walkability, bicycleability, mass transit ability. This project is very high dense. Well, that high density promotes walkability and getting out of cars. So in that regard, I'm really glad to see this come along. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions, council? All right. Thank you so much. And at this point, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Actually, Mayor, if you
I'm
could
going-
ask the public if they have any comment before you close the hearing.
Okay, so we still have no public comment, correct?
No, Mayor, we have forgotten no requests.
Okay, so now I am closing
Good.
the public hearing. Thank you. All right, moving down to item number 9, discussion items. Item A is the introduction of a rate study team for the City of Flagstaff water, reclaimed water, and wastewater cost of service, rates, and fees study.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Erin Young, Water Resources Manager. And tonight, we're excited to introduce to you our team for the embarking on our rate study. So this is a longer-term study. We're looking at about a year from now, adopting any changes to rates or fees. Our city team is pretty broad. It includes a number of folks in water services, but also our finance team, Rick Tatter and Brandy Suda, as well as Sarah Langley on communications. Just as important, the financials, getting the financials correct is to this study. It's also important that we have community engagement and a lot of engagement through our City Council and Water Commission. So with the introduction tonight, Stantec will present the process for the study, as well as the outreach plan and a timeline, and we would love your feedback. Now is time. If you have any ideas or questions, let us know. And we're at the start of this marathon. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Carol Molesky, our project manager with Stantec, and she'll take it from here.
Thank you, Erin. Good afternoon, Mayor and members of council. I hope that you can hear me okay.
We can.
Excellent, thank you. As Erin mentioned, we've embarked on this rate study. As you could see from your screens, this is a water, reclaimed water, and wastewater cost of service rates and fees study. I'd like to start because I have all of my team members here online. We'd like to introduce ourselves and tell you a little bit about ourselves. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about our process and the current milestone schedule. Then we'll be happy and love to talk with you about your questions. I'm going to start with me. As you know, my name is Carol, and I will be the project manager. I am the project manager on this study, and I've been working with Erin and Shannon Jones and Rick Tatter and other members of your team for quite a while here. My background is in agricultural and resource economics. So I'm an economist. I've been working in the financial analyses field for more than 25 years. I'm currently located in Cleveland, Ohio, but I made my start in Colorado and New Mexico. I work on rate studies, fee studies, everything to do with water, wastewater, reclaimed water, stormwater across the nation. I'm really thrilled to be working with your team of great people, as well as my team. And I'd like to turn this over to our project director, Andy Burnham.
Thanks, Carol. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mayor and Council. My name is Andy Burnham, and I'm serving as the project director for the study. So while I'm out of Tampa, Florida, like Carol, I've been spending over 20 years doing utility rate studies across the country for municipalities of all shapes and sizes, from communities with 800 customers to communities like New York City with 800,000 customers. So I've taken on leadership responsibilities with the American Water Works Association associated with management and rate-related issues. So I lead the Management Leadership Division for AWWA. I'm the chair, which oversees the Rates and Charges Committee and the publications of rate-making manuals for large and small systems, as well as financing. So this is very much near and dear to my heart. I've spent a better part of my career investing a lot of time trying to help innovate in the industry and bring best practices to all the communities we work with. So I find myself doing a lot of work in Arizona these days, not only with yourself, but also with many communities. So we kind of bring the best of both worlds in terms of national practices and understanding and benchmarking, but also what's going on locally through our work with communities like Phoenix, Queen Creek, Surprise, Tempe, and others. So looking forward to engaging with yourselves and the community in the conduct of the study. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Tim to talk a little bit about himself and his role in facilitating that.
Thanks, Andy, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tim Hancock. I have about 33 years of background and experience in planning, from urban planning all the way through public outreach and engagement. I've had the great pleasure of working with Andy and several of his teams throughout the country on everything from rate studies to creation of stormwater utilities and so forth. Over the past 10 years, I've increasingly focused my practice on supporting local, state, and federal clients throughout the country on projects such as this, really making sure that the outreach and engagement platform that is created is both meaningful and informative for the community. And so I think you'll hear me say throughout this process, our goal is to inform and educate as well as to gain feedback. And working with Sarah Langley and a lot of your very talented staff, I look forward to bringing that forward. And I will turn things over for introductions to Rob McCandless. How's that for giving you no warning, Rob? How did I do okay? All right.
Thank you. Got it. Hey, I'm Rob McCandless. I am based out of Tempe, Arizona, in our Stantec office down here. And I've done most of my career in Arizona. As a matter of fact, one of my first projects as a water and wastewater engineer was on the Rio de Flag water reclamation plant when it was under construction. And I've continued to do a lot of work. I'm currently the Stantec's National Water Reuse Practice Lead. I did one of my recent projects a few years ago was also for looking at advanced treatment for City of Flagstaff. And I will turn this over to Zach.
Thanks, Rob, and good afternoon, Council. My name's Zach Cook. I'm an analyst on the project, and I've been working at Stantec for about 2 years now. I've done multiple rate studies in the area in Arizona, at Tempe, Queen Creek, Surprise, and also some rate studies in Southwest Colorado. And I am super thrilled to be working with the city and getting this rate study moving along and finished. So thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Audrey Barber. I'm up in Washington. I've been with Stantec for about a year. I'm also an analyst on the project, so I work really closely with Zach and Carol on the data side of things, and I'm learning a lot.
Thanks, everyone. And I'd ask that Tim gets us started on the next slide, please. Thank you. The rate study that we have started in May has quite a few steps. I'm not sure if you've seen the overview of the scope that you've asked us to work on, but we have started with the study orientation, of course, and public outreach planning. Public outreach in that first task bubble encompasses the whole plan, so you'll see that throughout this whole study. We're currently nearing the completion, or at least the drafting of task 2, the 10-year financial plans. We're going to be talking with you about this step in the near future, but this is where we've been spending much of our time, and a lot of your staff have committed many hours to working through these questions on financial planning and costs, et cetera, for water services. We are starting on task 3, that cost of service analysis task, and then we'll move along to rate design. And the task 5 shows that there's a rate model. So we don't just do the study and leave you a report and walk away. Your staff will have a model to use going forward for future planning and future scenarios. We'll be preparing reports and presentations on recommended rates. So that's the whole span of the study over the next year that Erin mentioned. And I'd like to dig a little bit more into the details of this study. The rate study process answers 3 basic questions. How much does water services need to recover from its customers? This is called revenue sufficiency or financial forecasting. We make sure that this analysis achieves your financial policies for the water system, the wastewater system, and the reclaimed water system. We're focused on those 3 utilities. We want to make sure that we're sustainably and equitably funding your system needs. The second question is, from whom do we get this revenue? This next set of tasks is a cost allocation task. We don't make things up. We use the American Water Works Association and the Water Environment Federation to guide our processes. So we're going to be looking at allocating costs and determining which classes of customers cause which costs and how to translate that into recovering costs from those customers. And then finally, how do we collect the revenues that are needed? This is that last step, that rate design step, where we develop simple, equitable, and sustainable rate designs for each of the 3 systems. We want to balance multiple objectives through this rate design phase, and you'll have a lot to do with that as we go through some of the steps and the questions that we have for you. On the next slide, we list something that has really driven your need for this rate study that we understand and what we're doing in this rate study. These policy strategies were developed in the rate study, and these came from you and from Water Commission members and stakeholders that we understood were concerned about addressing specific strategies. Strategy 1 has to do with implementing water and wastewater rates and charges that are legal, fair, equitable through that cost of service study. That's exactly what we're doing and what our primary driver is here. Strategy 2 deals with developing the long-range financing plan to determine the funding needs of each of the systems. That's what I mentioned is where we've been spending most of our time lately. Strategy 3 is to establish those fees that cover the costs of service and to make sure that regulatory requirements are met, as well as all the other requirements that are needed on a day-to-day and annual basis. And then strategy 4, discuss forward-thinking or new opportunities for how rates and pricing strategies can help achieve the goals of the utility. So we know that I mentioned we're using by-the-book methods. However, we focus on your unique characteristics, your customers' unique needs, and the city's unique goals and desires. So there is some flexibility there. We will be creative, but not illegal. But we will be making sure that we address your needs through this whole study. Looking forward, we're going to be talking with you frequently throughout this process. This schedule shows quite a few different steps. So we started at the top in May of this year. You'll see that there are some stretches of time where we're going to be meeting monthly. We'll be meeting monthly with updates to the Water Commission. We'll be meeting monthly with you to get your feedback, keep you updated on each of these tasks and each of the phases of these tasks. The orange areas represent public outreach and opportunities to gain stakeholder input. We also know that we're working for that orange area that's kind of by itself. That is your retreat, where we're going to come talk with you for about a half day and talk you through a lot of the decision points during this rate study. So that's October 12th. You'll get to meet us, and we'll get to meet you in person, and you'll get to meet us in person. Then after the technical analysis is done, approximately around January of next year, we're going to be writing reports and conducting meetings with you to make sure that we are in line with your goals and needs over the remainder of the study so that you could adopt or approve the rates that you're comfortable with and the approaches you're comfortable with and get them implemented by September of 2024. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim.
Well, thank you very much, Carol. And if there was any error in switching to slides too fast, that's on me. I'm the slide guy because Carol is in between things right now. And if she has to step away, she wanted to make sure we at least didn't stop the presentation. So I will own all of the mistakes. Carol gets credit for all the things that go well. But just want to share with you a little bit about the communication plan elements, what they are, how they're going to be delivered. You know, one of the first things we've been doing and working with your staff is making sure we have a confirmation of the messaging elements. What are the things that your utility is focused on? And number one, first and foremost, is keeping it clean. What does that mean? It means to meet or exceed the regulatory requirements. And one of the things I explained to residents and communities all over the U.S. is we've become so accustomed to turning the faucet on and water coming out. When the 99.999% success rate, you know, we take certain things for granted, but keeping that water flowing is a critical component of not just for your residences, but businesses as well. And the high quality of water is key. And that's something you've seized on and done a very good job with. It's not so much that high quality water is an attractant, believe it or not, but if you have poor quality water, you certainly are going to be known for it. So we want to maintain that high quality of water throughout the community for residents and businesses. Reclamation is increasingly a primary focus area of what we're looking at in communities. And again, you know, the city of Flagstaff is doing very well in this area, but, you know, can we always do better? Absolutely. So reclaiming water for tomorrow and treating it as the resource that it is, and as well as investing in efficiency. This is a focus of your staff to make sure a lot of your programs that are set up are making the most out of everything that you do. And so the efficiency is key. So all these messages build into a communication plan. And as I mentioned earlier, we want to use the communication plan to educate and inform throughout the life of the study. Currently, your staff is working with some stakeholder mapping. You've got some great base maps built basically out of recent events and occurrences. We're going to be creating a project-specific website called cleanwaterflagstaff.com. That website will become the primary communication portal. So as things are developed in the study, they can be made public very easily, very quickly. Similarly, if the public has questions or concerns, they can post those through the website. They don't have to wade through any city directories. They can go straight to the website, pose a question, and we'll get that to the appropriate people. So that website becomes that key communication portal. The other thing we have, and Carol hit on this, is the regular updates to Council and Water Commission, monthly, if not more frequent. And on top of that, we will have fact sheets, collateral materials, and we'll also be doing additional outreach meetings within the community. One of those is coming up this month. Your staff is holding small group roundtables within the community to gather information and input. And by the way, don't jump on that cleanwaterflagstaff.com address just yet. We've secured the domain name for you. We're in the process of working with your staff of building that website. So these are all the elements that are going to be part of the communication plan that, again, is designed to educate and inform, but most importantly, to take some things that can be very technical and bring them to the conversational level. And so you've got a fantastic staff that I've had the pleasure of working with so far. I look forward to continuing to work with them as we develop this. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to either Carol or Andy. And I think we're to a point now where we're going to address any questions or input that you may have.
Thank you, Tim. And we would welcome any questions or feedback.
Councilmember Matthews.
Thank you, Mayor. So I think I feel like I need to get up to speed here a little bit. Our water department is an enterprise fund, correct? And I don't remember at our budget retreat that it was running in the red. So currently, we're covering our services, or was it? So, okay, I'll wait for Rick to answer that before I go on.
There we go. Hello, Mayor and Council. Rick Taylor, Management Service Director. We always bring forward a balanced budget. So they did have a balanced budget this year and a balanced 5-year plan. But there's a lot of things that they still need that aren't funded. And there's several things that are funded with one-time monies that are really operational costs that should be in an ongoing basis. So they are having revenue strains to the operating expenses they have currently. Does that answer your question?
Yes, kind of. I just, right now with cost of living up here and inflation and, I'm kind of, I just feel like, we could have a big wish list and these are all the things we could just really do wonderful if we had all this stuff. And how much of it is critical, and are we going to pass that on to the rate, payers? I just try to be sensitive to that because we've increased some rates on some other stuff and we're just really pricing people out of our city. And I've got some major concerns about the end result I know is going to be increase the rates. And maybe it's absolutely necessary to keep the quality of water and what we need to do, but I'm just wondering how we determine what's really necessary and what's a big wish list that, if we could just afford it and had all the money in the world, how could we, pay for all this? So, I just wanted to put that out there, that I just feel a little uneasy about it.
Okay, and I think that's what we're going to try and get out of this process. And I don't know if Carol wants to speak to it more, but we're going to bring you with some concepts and ideas of what rates could fund and what we can do and what we may not be able to do during this rate study. But it's always good at least to do the rate study to get in mind at where you're at with your services, your revenues that are being brought in. Whether council adopts the rates or recommendation, that's going to be up to you as a council sometime next late spring, early summer. So we'll have a balance of that conversation.
Any other questions? Councilmember McCarthy.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I might just casually mention that the last time this rate study was done, I was on the Water Commission, so I was right in the middle of this thing. And I distinctly remember that the consultant we had at the time and the city staff and the Water Commission and then eventually the council were all very involved in the interesting process. So Aaron, I'll ask you a question. I heard the phrase advanced treatment. At some point, we're going to have to address our chemicals that are in our drinking water, chemicals of emerging concern, especially in our reclaimed water, more than our drinking water. And I know other cities in Arizona have addressed this issue, but we have not yet. So, I mean, at some point, I think council's going to have a discussion about that issue with a lot of input and guidance from staff who are more knowledgeable about that issue. So, could you comment on that? Thank you.
Sure, Mayor and Councilmember McCarthy, that we know that is a policy topic that will want to be discussed. So our team is talking about that topic among others and how we work through that. And it might get to Councilmember Matthews' point of, what are the fundamental things that we're funding, and then what are these additional things? The important thing to remember is we're meeting and exceeding water quality standards right now set by the state. So that is going above and beyond, but we will get there to have that discussion during the rate study.
Erin, can you speak briefly to the outreach that you're going to do? We know that the stormwater rate discussion, I think felt like it, to some members of the community, it felt like they didn't know that it was being undertaken. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I would like to, Mayor. I'm not the expert. I think we have experts either online or with Sarah Langley who might be able to talk to that with a more up-to-date information on our plan.
Hello, Tim Hancock again. I know Sarah's coming up and I don't want to preempt her, but Sarah, do you want to kind of kick things off and I'll fill in as needed?
Okay, there we go. Thanks, Tim, for hopping on. Yeah, I think you gave a really great overview, very high level of the outreach plan that we have in the works. I believe a communications plan is also being drafted right now. So that will be really useful in kind of putting some more meat on the bones and adding some detail in terms of, you know, who we're going to reach out to, how are we going to do it, and when. But I think Tim would echo this, that we're really going to use kind of all the tools in our belt on this one. We've recognized that it's super important to reach out to everyone that we can. I think Shannon Anderson said, you know, communicate often and communicate early. So that's what's really going to drive our outreach on this one. Tim, did you have anything to add?
Really just building on that, one of the things we try and do on a study of this nature is we look for what I call the public intersection points. Where's information going to be coming forward in the study that will land in the public space? And then we want to marry up some type of event or some type of an outreach component that stays slightly ahead of that. Well, you know, the surprises are the enemies in the public sector. And so we want to do our best to make sure that we are out in front of information before it lands in the public space, and we'll be working with your staff to do that. Your staff does a really great job in engaging with the community. We look to support and grow that for this process. So, you know, stay tuned. The communications plan will detail some of that. But the things I want to really bring out is no matter what communication plan you develop, no matter what plan you develop, you need to be flexible. And so as we go forward, if we find that there's a given tool that is really having greater reach than others, and we want to expand on that and pull back on something else, we want to maintain that flexibility as well. But we will be starting with a fairly solid communication plan covering as many aspects as is reasonable.
Councilmember Harris.
Can you just remind me when you said the website would go live, or did you say when it would go live?
No, ma'am, we do not have a live date yet. We just secured the domain name and are putting that together. So depending on how much kind of reiteration process we go through, could be as soon as a couple weeks, could be as much as 4 weeks out, but sometime in that time frame, we expect it to go live. Predominantly before we see anything really coming out of any substance or value for the community to review, we will make sure that website is up and active.
Okay, and then my next question might be a little bit more difficult for you to answer, but try anyway. So as we know, everyone is not connected to the internet, and so even though we will put things on our website, how are those folks that are not connected in some way, either they don't have access to internet or they do not know how to use, you know, the internet features or whatever. So is there a plan to do something for those folks? Because, you know, I'm always concerned about us always wanting to put everything on the web, and everybody doesn't do that. And so can you talk a little bit?
Yes, ma'am. And actually, that's a great question. It's one that we increasingly get in communities we work in. And so some of the things we look at are, for example, we want to look at the broadband saturation rate by areas within the city. And by gathering that information, we're many times able to find what we will call underserved areas that may not have as readily accessible internet capabilities as others. That's where we begin to target, for example, in-person meetings. We also want to locate those in-person meetings along either transit lines or in hub areas where it's easier to get to by folks that maybe have a little bit of a disadvantage when it comes to transportation. So the communication plan isn't just about putting forth information on a variety of platforms. is making sure that each of those platforms will speak to a different segment of the community that may find difficulty reaching it otherwise. So yes, ma'am, we will put that forward in the communication plan. And then, like I said, we are always open to adjustments. If we find that there's a part of the community that just isn't really showing up or doesn't seem to be, connecting, we can tailor and shift as needed. I hope that at least addressed your question from a high level.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, council? All right. Thank you so much, and we look forward to very regular updates.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and thank you, Stantec. And we'll move on. See you soon.
All right, thank you. Okay, before we move on to item number 9B, we're going to take a 10-minute break. Okay, we are ready to get started back up. We're on item 9B. This is progress report regarding the 10-year housing plan and the bond fund program implementation. Welcome.
It has a red light now. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Sarah Dar, the pleasure of serving as a housing director for the city of Flagstaff. Today is actually the 23rd anniversary of me starting with the city of Flagstaff. It was the day after Labor Day, so it floats around. Might not be the actual day, but it was the Tuesday after Labor Day. So, and I'm still not asking myself why. I'm still good. But no, I'm not. It's all good. With me today is Justina Costa, Assistant Housing Director, and on the far side is Jen Michelson, who's our Housing Planning Manager. If I don't have the details you need, I'm going to punt to the A-team sitting over here. So thank you for having us for this quick update and overview. We were last before you. We spent Valentine's Day with you, so just over 6 months ago, and since then we've made quite a bit of progress, which I would like to share with you on the 10-year plan update. We'll go over the bond programming update, a very quick funding administration update, and then some coming attractions. As a quick reminder, housing plan, 10-year housing plan, we did a 2022 progress report and an 18-month implementation plan, which takes us from January 2023 to June 2024. If you'll recall, this will be the only 18-month implementation plan. Next year, we'll be in front of you in June with an annual implementation plan. So, super quick updates on 10-year housing plan. We have the following graphic on our website, which is being updated quarterly as we see progress in the number of residents impacted by housing programs, market rate units brought on, and affordable units created or preserved. These most recent updates were on August 14th, and go through June 30th. We do have some great staff who keep track of all of these numbers and sit down and make sure the metrics as we defined them in the implementation plans, et cetera, are the same metrics that we're using to report on an ongoing basis. So, overview of the strategies within that 18-month implementation plan. Hire an independent consultant to review city codes, processes, fees, et cetera. This is underway, Council. Thank you for approving a contract, I believe, on July 3rd with Dowell. It's a multidisciplinary team led by Michelle McNulty with staff from housing and sustainability, because those are the lenses that this code analysis and land availability and suitability is being conducted through. Additional staff from planning, engineering, and a NAPTA representative make up the core team working on this project and moving it forward. I believe there's an update for this one scheduled on Halloween. So it won't be scary. It will be exciting. So that one's underway. Create 5.3 was explore adding affordable housing as an allowed use in public facilities PF zone. This is also underway. Our fabulous Tiffany Antal, our code administrator, has incorporated this into a code amendment process that she has underway at this point in time. I believe it will go to the Housing Commission this fall, making its way through the various steps on its way to you. Create a dedicated team within Planning and Development Services specifically for affordable housing projects. This one is completed. However, the process changed. There was a rechartering of IDS right after the 10-year plan was adopted. And some of that language has changed. We're keeping the stated goal the same so that we're able to create that transparency, but we were able to accomplish this through formalizing the role of our housing analyst, previously Jennifer Michelson, within that IDS review process, and making sure that the team that's working on whichever affordable housing project she's involved with, and we're able to move through the process smoothly.
Can you give us a 20-second summary of what the IDS process looks like? Or 25-second?
Yes, I can. The IDS process is an interdepartmental group that meets and goes over different development proposals in order to identify strengths and weaknesses, things that might need to be addressed by the entity that turned it in, things that are great and don't need to be addressed by the entity that turned it in. And so having housing at that table can be critical to make sure that that conversation happens early and often, not late and rarely. That was the non-planner understanding of IDS.
That was fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, I got it okay.
Dan, what was this?
Yeah. I'm not a planner, that's what that was. And thank you for the question. I realized I just started using acronyms without defining them, which is something we work hard not to do. All right. Connect 2.3 was identified as exploring and reviewing member composition of our Housing Commission and Housing Authority Board to make sure diversity is reflected. Staff had a great meeting with legal and the city clerk's office to consider a number of different ways that this could be accomplished. You may have noticed on recent applications that are coming to you for different commissions and appointments is that there is a specific question on those applications now that says the city of Flagstaff is committed to increasing diversity in every board and commission. How do you contribute to this? And so, of course, we can't control that makeup of who applies and who doesn't apply, but we are asking that diversity question. We found the city clerk's office, this will shock you, but remarkably helpful and open-minded and looking at different ways that this will work not just for our housing bodies, but for our overall commissions in making sure that that diversity goal remains center point to do what is going on.
Okay, that's a good question there.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you feel that because this is one of the commissions where we define the type of occupation that we want to fill each seat, do you feel that the occupations that were originally outlined when the commission was created still achieve what we need them to achieve? Or would you recommend changing it up at all?
You're asking really fun questions today. Mayor, no. At this point in time, I wouldn't recommend changing it. We may need to tweak a couple pieces of it. We have a hard time getting a developer seat because we don't have a lot of local developers up here and very few live within city limits. So we've had some challenges filling seats. We've been looking at different ways we can look at what the definition of a developer versus a builder is, that type of thing. We actively chat with folks as we meet them of like, oh, were you aware that the Housing Commission and your expertise could be really, really valuable? I love the feedback that we get from the Housing Commission because we have lovely, various voices, and very few on there who would ever hesitate to speak up. So we do have some healthy conflict that takes place, healthy debates, I would say, if folks are like, well, I don't quite see it that way. And so I think we're getting good feedback. We really are. We will think about your question and come forward with a proposal if we see that it's not working. All right, this slide is updated since I turned it in last week. We were to examine and update, if needed, the Flagstaff, our particular housing limited English proficiency plans. The one for the housing section, it said underway, nearly complete. I was told today I was wrong. It's always my favorite moments, and it's actually completed. The public comment period ended 8/31. We had no public comments submitted. Since then, our staff has been trained. Adriana Fisher is the staff person who was in charge of this, and she was right on top of those dates. I believe I saw an email this afternoon to get it posted on the website. The Housing Authority limited English proficiency plan was completed earlier in the year, early spring and summer. And so those both are completed. Some of the ongoing strategies in that 18-month implementation plan: create a housing navigator or advocate positions. Our progress, our third year of one-time funding. We have a lovely, lovely navigator who dedicates her time. She has the correct skill set in order to work with some of our most challenging folks who are not always able to independently identify housing. She also works with our specialty vouchers, like our emergency housing vouchers, which are working to transition people out of homelessness into housing. Implement a public outreach campaign. This has long been a stated piece of something that we work on that we're not very strong at. And we're not very strong at it because we have spent decades without enough money and really long waiting lists. And you don't particularly advertise when you have really long waiting lists and not enough resources to offer the community. However, we're realizing through the 10-year plan process, et cetera, that we need to tell our story better. And that we are working with CVB team to create an overall outreach campaign. In the meantime, we have October every year is Housing America Month. So we'll be having some particular local outreach during that time period. And then what we realized while we're having some of these conversations, it's not necessarily all about one campaign. It's not necessarily about, oh, guess what? Would you like to see this? It's really about making that message consistent. It's about taking advantage of local media opportunities when they're offered to us, pursuing them when they're not. That type of thing. So here we've listed just a few of the things that have taken place in the last 6 months. There are some local things. We've also been requested several times to speak statewide on what we're doing with the 10-year housing plan as well as the bond funding. We received an award for Outstanding Affordable Housing Initiative for the 10-year housing plan, et cetera. There is another award that will be announced later this week that we've been asked not to speak to. So, but there is another one. There's another one coming. We also have been contacted from some out-of-state folks. Adriana did an interview with the Asheville Watchdog, a phone interview about the 10-year housing plan and the housing emergency. We are getting some national notice for what we've proposed, what we're doing, and some of the ways that we're doing it. And so we are very careful to say in those moments that what we're doing works for our community and that these are very community-based plans. And we're happy to share what we're doing and would love to hear in return what you're doing as well. So I really appreciate staff's willingness to step up, spend some time after hours, First Friday Art Walk, et cetera, to take advantage of some of these opportunities to tell our story. Two not started yet in that 18-month plan. We still have a year before that. Well, now 11 months before the end of that time period. One is acquire and rehabilitate already built properties. This ended up being a category within bond funding. And so this one, we're tackling some of the others first, which I will cover next. And to create and maintain an affordable housing impact statement. The intent of this statement is to come in as developers, builders turn in plans to, are you tearing down housing units? How many housing units are you creating? If you're tearing down housing units, are they occupied? What's happening to the people within them, et cetera? I believe this affordable housing impact statement came out of our equity group. And this is something that will be coordinated as we look at the code changes, the incentive policies, et cetera, with Dowell. The intent is not to add another burdensome step for the developer, but rather to make it as simple as possible so that we can have a better handle on what those developments are doing within our community. Right now, we can go talk to the planner, and the planner's like, yes, this and this and this, but there has not been yet a consistent, easy way to access that data. And so this was one of the strategies coming out of the 10-year plan I was particularly excited about. That's the end of my 10-year plan slides. Any questions before I jump to bond?
Any questions on this portion? I have a question. There's, I'm aware of a apartment development, and we had a meeting talking about this, that it's coming to the end of its LIHTC funded, which is low-income housing tax credit, funded affordability. Bond funds, were some of them anticipated for working on a project such as this? Or is that what we mean by acquire and rehabilitate already built properties?
Mayor, thank you for the question. It is not that acquire and rehabilitate already built properties for affordable housing. Well, it could fit within there, and the other conversation surrounding this was adaptive reuse. This is the first time in our community we are facing some of the tax credit properties rolling off of their affordability time period. There's a state process where the state publishes that these are for sale, essentially. They have to be offered for sale through an Arizona Department of Housing process for a year. The asking price for the two properties is $22.2 million. That's not a type of money we've ever had access to. And so, I mean, our entire bond program was $20 million. So it is something we've been talking with other communities about. What do you do when something like this comes up? Sometimes you see them purchased. Sometimes there's a developer that is interested in preserving the affordability, et cetera. These two developments were some of the first built in our community before my tenure, before we started asking for a 30-year commitment of buildings coming into our community via the LIHTC program. And also the state is now incentivizing a longer time period. The draft QAP, which is the application document for LIHTC, this year gives extra points if you go to 50 years. And so there is an unfortunate piece of some of these rolling off. We don't know who might buy them. We don't know if they will still maintain accepting Section 8 vouchers and providing reasonable rents. When we find out who's purchasing them, we will certainly meet with them, make them aware of our community needs, et cetera, and talk about any ways that they would be voluntarily willing to assist with our local market. The other piece is that often these complexes rolling off of their LIHTC completion are reaching the end of their useful life. Rental properties have a shorter useful life for multiple reasons, and we will often see them purchased or we will not. So our research about other communities is we see them purchased and rehabilitated into safer, more stable properties within the community.
Thank you. And Vice Mayor has a question.
Sarah, thank you. Looking forward to an ongoing conversation about all this, and thank you for all the hard work you and your team tirelessly put into what is really a critical conversation. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I do think it's an appropriate place to just create some space and to keep it part of the conversation. We have two crises that are declared for the city of Flagstaff. That is housing and climate. And I think we're in a really good place internally in the city, where how we think about those two things and how we talk about them, and how they're synergistic, and how it's a non-competitive situation. I think out in the public, the narrative is a little bit more confusing and confused, and not picking on any particular person or conversation here, I've been hearing it a lot from a variety of different directions. And the conversation kind of gets whittled down to what I would consider, what I would characterize as, this is at some level a zero-sum game. We have to rob Peter to pay Paul. It's a competitive thing, and I try to reject that narrative when I hear it cropping into the conversation, because I don't think it's, to the extent that it may even be accurate in specific details of each of our, how we're tackling our crises, I don't think it's helpful for the overall the causes that we have. Wanted to give you just a minute or two to speak about that as part of the strategy and that as part of the plan, how the city is shaping a narrative with the public that we're moving forward 100% best foot forward on both of these topics, and we don't want to get caught into a trap of arguing about which one is more important than the other, et cetera, et cetera. So keep your comments more specific to how this slides into the plan and action deliverables on that front.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, I know you're not supposed to say good question, but really good question. We have a great working relationship with sustainability. That didn't happen by accident, it happened on purpose. And housing staff will likely roll their eyes when I say our goal is and, not or. There will be places where it is or, where one wins out, if you will, or one is more fitting for whatever the discussion is than the other. But our true agreed upon goal is that we feed each other, that they are symbiotic. Yes, there, the word just left my head. So that we can work together, we can accomplish the things, and we can accomplish them at the same time. We have been focused on figuring out some of our pieces. Sustainability was involved, and I say that with a smile because they were greatly involved in the creation of the 10-year housing plan. What happened after that as well is that the pieces that we had agreed upon working between the 2 and the 10-year housing plan were lifted and put into the climate action plan that was approved after the housing plan. And so we are working on common goals. One of those is that code analysis of what does it look like. We do not necessarily want competing incentives, because then we're having people choose and then maybe criticizing them for not doing the other. So we're working to take a comprehensive look at all of those things. In fact, we just had we're interviewing for staff, I'll mention in a minute, last Friday, and one of the questions was, a citizen comes up to you in a public meeting and says, how can the city have two? And are they not competing? What would you say to the citizen? And so it was kind of fun to hear the answers. We had one really good answer. We had one answer where we're like, can you tell us a little more? So we are paying attention to it. I really appreciate you bringing it up, because the more times we are able to have that conversation in the community, that both of these things are addressable and that they are complementary to each other is great. while at the same time acknowledging that there are going to be times where they just are counterintuitive. And we're working to minimize those. However, we will get there at times. And I can't come up with examples because we don't know yet what they are. But something like reducing utility costs works for affordable housing, efficient utilities works for sustainability, et cetera. So we keep a regular conversation going with sustainability.
Thank you, Sarah. I just wanted to carve out a little bit of space for that. I think we've given it the attention it deserves. And just to encourage you to keep that topic in the front on the planning level and the actionables and the deliverables as we're moving forward. We can't control what the community is saying or what the narratives are out there, but we can have a plan to correct and not correct, or correct might be too strong a word, but to redirect people's thinking and the narratives around how these things move forward in tandem. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that opportunity.
Councilmember Harris.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to think outside of the box a little bit. So we've been talking a lot about affordable housing. We've mostly been talking about building more housing, correct? We have a lot of housing in Flagstaff already. Not that it's all affordable, but we have a lot. We have a lot of rental properties in Flagstaff. So sometimes at night when I wake up and I can't sleep, I kind of think crazy thoughts. And I think, has anybody ever talked to all of the people who have rental property to really sit down and have a conversation about our cost of housing and how we have a housing emergency and that this is all of our problem, and if we all don't try and figure out how to solve it, all of us are going to suffer? So I don't know if that's even something that we could do. But we sometimes make the assumption that everybody knows that we have a housing emergency, you know, and that we have a plan. But sometimes people are just going on with their lives and they're not thinking that this has anything to do with me. So what do you say to that?
I say that next time I would like everyone to submit their questions before we start. No, I'm kidding. Thank you so much. Mayor, Councilmember Harris, that has occurred to us. We do have a relationship with the Arizona Multi-Housing Association. They've been really busy legislatively in the past year, so we have not had as many sit-downs as I would like. Our Section 8 staff, our housing voucher staff, talk to landlords every day and talk about this is what the voucher is worth and these are what our housing prices are and this is the struggle that people are facing. So we are doing on a more informal basis, on a regular basis, as people in our community work to find places to take those vouchers. There is a difficult part of that population for us to reach, and that is the onesies, twosies. Those are the, I own one rental property or two rental properties. There used to be a group called IROC, which was the Independent Renter, IRO, independent renters, independent landlords. The C is for a council. And we would be able to meet with them and have conversations with them. They have not been meeting for a number of years. So that conversation with the individual pieces, individual landlords has been harder. However, within the 10-year plan, you will see strategies talking about exploring a rental rehabilitation program, talking about additional landlord outreach, that type of thing. Those simply are not in the 18-month implementation plan, but I believe are slated for near future, especially some of those education pieces. So we will keep that in mind, hoping to calm your mind when you wake up in the middle of the night. So we'll take note of your interest in that as well.
Councilmember McCarthy.
Well, thank you, Mayor. My comments kind of tie into the Vice Mayor's comments. When I was reading the packet, I read that there's going to, I think it was the zoning laws they're going to look at to see if we can cut cost. Cost savings is the phrase they used, I believe. The point I want to make is that there's two kinds of cost savings. One is like, you know, the day you complete it and get your occupancy certificate. But the one that really makes more sense is the long-term cost. I'll just give you an example, and I've said this at council a few years ago. When I built the house that I'm in now, I spent just a couple $100 extra and upgraded my insulation. My house has always stayed cool in the summer. I've never been hot in my house in the 18 years I've lived in it. But my neighbors who took the standard insulation and saved like $200 or $300, whatever it was, their houses were all hot. So what did they do? They went out and spent thousands of dollars on air conditioning systems. I don't need an air conditioning system. So the major point I'm trying to make is that there's short-term costs and long-term costs, and we need to take both into account. Sometimes spending a little bit more during initial construction can save horrendous amounts of money in the long run. Lower utility bills, not having to buy air conditioners, et cetera. So long-term versus short-term. Thank you.
Thank you. Ta-da. Thank you for the questions and great discussion. So moving on to bond update, it's important to start out with, we are the first ones in Arizona to undertake activities like this with general obligation bonds that are not infrastructure and construction. We don't have a model to follow. We're harvesting models from other states, et cetera, but when it comes to Arizona law, I'm sure you're familiar, there's a couple things different here. And we are working to do the appropriate research and due diligence to ensure success with the monies that we're being entrusted with. And I want to thank you and the community for the patience as we work to do this the right way, to ensure that long-term success. It isn't always fast, and housing staff is asking legal and procurement and finance questions that nobody ever dreamed that anyone would ask. And so we have had we have great partnerships with our internal support systems, and I wish we had a model. I wish we had a plug and play. We don't. So we're working on it. And it's always good to be first. We were the first municipal land trust. We were the first incentive policy. We were the first doing this. That's always fun and exciting, but it's called the bleeding edge for a reason. And that's because sometimes it's painful to go through it. We get calls from communities all over the state. Can we see your incentive policy? Can we see, you know, how'd you do your land trust? Well, what is this like? Like, how did you do that? Because we have been the leader in many housing pieces. This is not a pat myself on the back. This is a pat our community and our organization on the back, our city councils on the back, that some of the traditional tools just aren't working up here and giving us the opportunity to explore within legal boundaries, different things and ways that we can approach these challenges. So before we jump into an update on the housing bond programs, a quick reminder about the role of the Housing Commission. In the 2018 bond election process, the community was vastly concerned about who would oversee these bond funds. Yes, City Council is the ultimate authority, but who is going to provide oversight? In 2018, we listed a list of the types of professions and people that would sit on a body overseeing bond funds. We were envisioning a bond oversight committee at that point in time. After that bond initiative, it's not an initiative because it's not signatures, it was a bond measure, things changed. We lost by 747 votes, and I took that as we don't like the details versus we really don't want to do this. So in between those years, one of the things City Council did was create a housing commission with varied specific membership of folks. It's a 13-member commission. And something that council addressed in the ordinance creating the Housing Commission was specifically the wording, provide oversight of any funds approved by the electorate for housing purposes. So after the bond passed, we sat down with legal and said, so what does that mean? We knew what it meant, but we wanted to make sure we were encapsulating all of those different pieces and came up with the type of wording. The Housing Commission's role is to review and make recommendations to City Council. City Council is free to do whatever they choose to do. The Housing Commission has taken this role seriously. They took creating the bond recommendations very seriously, and this is one of the places I really love having the multitude of voices available on the Housing Commission, because we are seeing different points of view coming forward. So while what I'm going to be talking about is recommendations or where we are in processes, please keep in mind everything comes to you for approval. So the first program that we tackled was incentivizing private sector to incorporate affordable rental housing into new developments. This was noted as $5 million of the $20 million investment. Prior to May of this year, we met with legal and procurement and finance, and we did a bunch of research. And at our May Housing Commission meeting, established a working group of Housing Commission members to work with our fabulous Jen Michelson, vet the ideas, bounce things around, what does it look like, utilizing the guidance we received from legal, procurement, and finance. That group met 3 times in June and July and came up with a set of recommendations for program criteria, eligibility, et cetera. They met on October 28th to review the written document, draft written document that Jen had put together that we have now sent to legal for review, but it was only on August 30th. So legal is, they just got it. We've had lots of interest from the development community. We've had developers call and say, how do I access all 5 million? We've had developers call and say, we saw your bond program and now we're thinking about doing a project in Flagstaff. How much money could we have? So there's 5 million, which sounds like a big number until you start couching it in development. And then it's a much smaller number, and it was intended to leverage other funding sources, et cetera, in order to assist in bringing additional affordable units to the community. We anticipate bringing the draft document after legal review to the Housing Commission in September. You'll see here that when this schedule was created and presented to the Housing Commission in May, we were thinking we'd be back to the Commission in October. We think we are ahead of schedule, we think. I mean, barring legal telling us we're insane, which has happened, but I don't think this time it will. We will be in front of the Housing Commission in September. That puts us in front of you in October. We padded this schedule, Council, because we've never done this before, and if we missed the boat and we were getting meaningful feedback that needed to be incorporated, we wanted to have the time to do it. Right now, we're ahead of schedule. When it comes to the Housing Commission and we get that feedback, when it comes to you and we get that feedback, depending on what it is, we think we can finish early. But we wanted to make sure that we weren't cornering council and we weren't cornering the Housing Commission with, well, the schedule says that we're going to be done in October. We wanted to give sufficient time for the comment periods that go along with that and being able to incorporate your feedback. So you'll see in coming attractions in a moment that this one is on its way to you. The second one we're tackling is expanding the home buyer assistance program. We do, as you know, have the CHAP program, the Community Home Buyer Assistance Program, already in place. The intent is to mirror what is successful in that program with the bond funding, but to create a separate program for the bond funds so that we are able to track accomplishments. We are able to figure things out with the bond funds. What we've learned with the CHAP program in the past 18 to 24 months is that our market conditions have changed quite a bit. And by market conditions, I mean looking at both interest rates, the changes in our area median income, the housing prices that continue to climb, et cetera. And we were not seeing the program being utilized in the way it was intended to or being as effective as we wanted it to be. It's intended to serve those also above 80% of area median income. What we're finding is the way that we had it set up, it was serving only those under 80% area median income because they had to have another funding source in order to make it work. So we did some number crunchings. We worked with our contracted provider with his housing solutions, came up with some different ways. Let's look at this, let's look at that. We've been working with legal. We are scheduled for an executive session with you on September 26th. Why am I talking about general funds? I'm talking about general funds because there's some money left in that contract. And our intent is to test the parameters with those general funds and see if we're hitting the mark before we introduce bond funds to it, where we know there's a much higher degree of community accountability and folks watching. We don't want to get it wrong. We don't want to create a housing bond down payment program and then come back in 6 months and be like, well, we'd really like to adjust this. We saw this really as an opportunity to create a platform where we can try out some of these new dynamics and then launch a bond program that is set up for success. And longer term, there were two elements of the bond that we recognize as longer term. One is repurposing existing available buildings into rental units. We've been looking in our spare time for best practices around the country for adaptive reuse. What we're finding for adaptive reuse right now is there are scads of office buildings in dense downtowns that are being turned into housing. We are not faced with that challenge of a dying downtown. So we are looking broadly for other examples. The other two that we are tackling, the incentives and the homebuyer assistance program update, seemed like lower hanging fruit and seemed like more demand is there, especially in the development piece for that, while keeping an eye on the repurposing. If somebody came and knocked on the door and said, hey, have you thought about, we'd think about. And then longer term is redeveloping city-owned housing to create additional rental units. This would be coupled with redoing our public housing. This is a much larger project. I copied this language straight out of the February presentation, anticipate 2 to 5 years. We're working on putting pieces into place that we can move into this direction. We're not there yet.
Sarah?
Yes,
I've got a question about that. It is a huge project. Do you anticipate contracting out with someone to manage that project or bringing on additional staff? How do you think that gets done? I just have a hard time imagining that any one of you has space in your schedules to oversee something like that.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, schedules and/or brains at this point in time. And yes, most communities accomplish this in partnership with a private developer, sometimes a financial analyst not that our finance staff is not fabulously skilled and they work very well, but this is a whole different game. And so, yes, we anticipate being able to do that. Having a little bit of money in the game at this point in time will give us a different position to negotiate. Our public housing is not in conditions where we have to do this. There are communities where their public housing is condemned. Our public housing is not condemned. It is aging and it is expensive to maintain, but we are not in a spot where we must do it. We're in a spot where it would be really, really helpful, which gives us some planning timelines. And so, no, we will need additional help. We are planning on additional help, and there are a few different models we've discussed with both procurement and legal to see which one would work the best given where we are. I would like 18 new staff members, please. No. It makes sense to bring on a consultant, to bring on a development partner in order to accomplish this because we wouldn't need that long term. All righty. Other associated activities. Communication. We got the message loud and clear. It's coming at me from every direction. It's coming at me when I walk down the street. It's coming at me from colleagues. It's coming to me from management. It's coming to me forever. not forever, but from everyone, that we must do a better job getting this message out, what we're working on, what we're accomplishing. The past 6 months has been a heck of a lot of research, and there's not a ton to share with that. We hear you. We typically have not been good at this, so we're asking for help. We're working with our other departments. We're meeting with Sarah Langley and her team in order to be able to communicate what we're working on, where we are with it, why in the world is it taking so long. We are at what is today, the 5th? So we're at 10 months since this was approved. That feels like a long time for folks. To us, it feels like we're drinking from a fire hose, and we're working lots of hours. And so we are going, this is my commitment to you, that we're going to do better in communicating that message. We will be in front of council on a more, not every 6 months, not every week, with a more regular update on where we are with this stuff. Sometimes this stuff doesn't move quickly. And we're just going to say that. Here's what we've been able to do. We are going to put a specific corner in our newsletter for calling out what we're doing with the bond-funded activities, getting them up and running, and then carrying through long-term with the results that they're producing. In addition to the regular council updates, we are reaching out to some of our partners to say, how can we best provide you with information that is digestible by the body that you serve? We hear you. We're going to do better. Thank you, everyone, for being willing to point out, because no one has come to us in a super negative accusatory, what are you doing? Everyone has said, this is what we're hearing. We know you guys are working really hard. How can we share that message better? Everyone has come with the intent of success, not the intent of sinking. And we see that, and we know that, and we appreciate it. I really, really, really need to give kudos to legal, procurement, finance, housing staff, my boss, city manager's office, et cetera, because we are asking hard questions. We are trying to figure things out nobody's figured out in Arizona before. And so they're really tolerant. They've always been tolerant when we come up with crazy ideas. But now our ideas are just a little bit crazier. And so it's been great to have that guidance. The other thing is branding. We have recognized a need to brand housing bond somehow. Many, many, many of the accomplishments of the housing bond are going to be hidden from the general public. It's not a bridge you can drive on. It's not going to be something like the Aquaplex that you can point to. They're going to be hidden within the community. They're going to be benefiting individual renters or homeowners, et cetera. We are recognizing the need that we need to create, and brand isn't my favorite word, but the process of creating a distinct identity for a project or a business in the mind of your target audience and consumers, where folks can look at something and be like, oh, that's a bond-funded program, versus, oh, look, the bridge is done. And so we're going to be working in that direction. That's the end of my housing bond updates. Before I move on, are there questions? Okay.
Councilmember Sweet, then Councilmember Matthews.
Thank you, and thanks for the update. I'm still a little confused on the working group, the commission, and how that all comes back to council. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I sure can. Thank you, Councilmember Sweet, for the question. We started with a working group of interested housing commission members that had specific expertise in the area to come up with recommendations and vet ideas before it went back to the full housing commission. That draft document, once vetted by legal, will go to the full housing commission for review and feedback from the full commission. They might tell us go back. They might tell us we don't like this or we do like that. Then once they have agreed and made a recommendation on this is what we recommend this program look like, it will come to council for approval.
Thank you. So I appreciate all of the process and the time and effort on this, and I know you all are working hard. I guess my question is, do we have any shovel-ready projects that are ready to go that are going to fall off their timeline because of the process that we're in right now?
Mayor, Councilmember Sweet, it depends on your definition of shovel-ready, but in housing land, shovel-ready means we're ready to turn dirt, or we have everything in place we need to do to move forward. And we have not been in touch with a developer that is at that stage of moving forward. So we are highly sensitive to the tax credit application process that is typically due the first week of April, and making sure that our process lines up with that so that anybody intending to use this as leverage for LIHTC is able to do so, et cetera. And so we've been in touch with multiple developers. We have not had somebody who has everything done and is ready to turn dirt, if only.
Can I ask one step further? Do you have anything that is almost shovel-ready? Because what I'm hearing is that we have some projects in the works that are needing some assistance, and we're kind of in the middle part of it.
Yes, and so are we. And so I think the piece to that is one of the reasons why there's a work session next week where we can pin down those details of where they are in the process. My understanding is that there are still many planning steps to go through before it would be shovel-ready.
And I appreciate that, and I look forward to next week and hearing more of the process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Matthews.
Thank you, Mayor. Sarah, your department works so hard, and I really appreciate, I've known you guys for a really long time from my past and actually current life. But I appreciate your talking about communication, because as we always experience, no matter if it's housing or what the other subjects are, it's all about public perception. And what they don't know, they make up in their minds, and that's the truth that they come to. So I really appreciate hearing that we can always do better in communication. But it's not all, I just wanted to point out that it's not just housing that's responsible for our housing crisis. I went to with the mayor, the Morrison Institute put on by ASU, and we were at the League of Towns and Cities and Towns, or however they say it. Everybody's talking about the housing crisis in Arizona and nationwide. A lot of great information about tax credit housing is one of the leading remedies for workforce housing. I've also heard a lot of comments about Flagstaff maybe being one of just a few cities that require a site plan before we allow grading, which is challenging for tax credit developers because of their short time frame in getting things turned around. And I think every session I went to in the various presentations, both at ASU and down in Tucson, they talked about also zoning for multifamily is the biggest issue preventing affordable housing, that we need to look at our zoning and our codes and our processes to make sure that we're allowing for multifamily for higher density. And so, it's not just, it's easy to put the burden all on housing, but we've got a lot of different departments that can contribute to the success or the frustrations in achieving the goals that we have. ADUs, we've talked a lot about having a stamped set of plans that can minimize the costs and stuff. And so I just want to just say it publicly that we have to come at this from a lot of different directions. And communication is one, but the actions are another. I've asked on multiple levels about putting how we are, each agenda item, how it connects to housing, our housing plan, just like we have for you know, our budget and our carbon neutrality and our regional plan, because publicly, when people see that we have it in the forefront all the time, it gives them that assurance that, look, everything that we're doing, we're seeing how it connects to advancing that. And I don't know, there's no movement in that, but I keep hoping and I keep asking. And it seems like a little thing, or maybe it's too big of a thing, but when it's never on the agenda, unless you come and do a presentation, people think out of sight, out of mind. So I think there's a lot of things little things that we can do to make a big difference. But I just want to say how much I appreciate the work that you and Justina and your whole team does, because you have a lot of properties and you have a lot of moving parts, and you guys are doing a great job, and I just want to give you my appreciation and your whole team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Matthews. I think one of the strengths of the 10-year housing plan is that it does acknowledge the needs for the code analysis with that lens to both housing and sustainability. Remove barriers to achieving the goals of Flagstaff's carbon neutrality plan and the Flagstaff's 10-year housing plan. Identify how existing codes create unintentional barriers for achieving carbon neutrality and the city's housing goals, and suggest code revisions that will reduce barriers and increase opportunities while preserving values the codes are intended to address. This is all language coming out of that code analysis RFP, RSOQ. So yes, one of the things in watching some of the legislation moving through the state legislature last year is some of the things being suggested to be done, we've been doing. And that's kudos to our planning department, our building department, et cetera. And so can we improve? Of course, there's always room for improvement, especially for new discussion. But there are quite a number of things that other communities are going, oh, you know, we could try. And when we look at our codes, historically, we're doing those. We do have one of the goals in the 10-year housing plan and also in the sustainability plan is to create those pre-approved ADU plans so that someone can come in, we say, here's 4 models, pick away, you can do whatever you want, but if you use one of these, you can get past that process. And so that is something that we've been having conversations with sustainability about, again, in our spare time. Our focus has been other places, but those items are certainly not lost. And I appreciate the recognition that this isn't simply a public funding problem, and it's not simply a public body problem. It is for all of us. And so thank you for that.
Any additional questions or comments? Great presentation.
Thank you. One more.
Oh.
Federal and state funding.
Yes.
There's been a lot of money moving. I thought I'd give you a quick flyover of that. So we're used to administering about $700,000 to $800,000 a year. In the past 2.5 years, we have been entrusted with $7.5 million to administer, and we're doing it. This is Christine Pavlik and Marissa Malloy, who are overseeing these contracts. You can see here, I'm not going to go through the funding sources. You can see the awards and what's remaining. Several of them are spent all the way down. Right now, we have 9 open contracts, 10 pending. Some of them you approved tonight. Thank you very much. Some are on the schedule for next week for approval, and 20 closed contracts. And we still have almost $1.2 million to allocate. So those processes are moving forward, and we are, our staff has done a phenomenal job absorbing the extra responsibility that came with administering these funds. Thank you for trusting us to do so. Some of them had different rules than we've ever worked with before, so that's always fun and learning. And this is where I give a shout out to grants and contracts, because while we're entrusted with it, grants and contracts is busy doing 1,000 things as well. Grants and contracts has really stepped in and helped us navigate some pieces that we may not have the staffing for or we were unfamiliar with. And so we are incredibly appreciative to the grants and contracts team in helping us navigate some of these pieces. Staffing update, council, thank you for approving 1 new position, a housing planner position approved in the '24 budget. We had second interviews conducted on Friday. Breaking news. We had 2 candidates. We think we're at a point of making an offer. Hopefully, we can land the individual. That position will help us with the significant increase we've had in our work program, which I'm reflecting here, which I've been talking about. I don't want to say that we're suffering from success, and I am by no means complaining. I love the support. I love the fact that the community is finally starting to understand and pay more attention. And we're doing our best to move things forward with the resources that we have. Coming attractions, I'm not going to go through these dates, but you can see the number of times we're going to be here with you or in another venue, bringing things forward with grant agreements coming forward. We have an executive session on down payment assistance. I put the Housing Commission meetings on here. We're planning to come in October with the CHAP contract renewal, and then possible council work session for rental incentive, depending on how Housing Commission goes in September. October's Housing America Month for outreach. And November, if we're not able to get there in October, then the rental incentive program work session and/or approval of program, which puts us still ahead of schedule. I'd like to thank you for the recent appointments to the Housing Commission. I know that was a big number of people. We've already planned and invited folks to an orientation session with them, and we'll also go over Housing Commission duties and responsibilities at our meeting in September. And with that, I would like to say thank you for your time and attention, and I'd be happy to answer any further questions.
Now's where I say, good presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional comments or questions, council? All right, thank you so much. Thank you, housing staff, all of you.
Thank you for the opportunity to give the update, and we appreciate it when you carry, because I know that you do, when you carry our messages out into the community as well. So thank you so much. It takes all of us, what does it say? It takes the teamwork to make the dream work. And so it's corny, but it's housing staff, so it is corny. Thank you so much, and I will get out of your hair.
All right, we are moving down to item number 10, future agenda item requests. After discussion and upon agreement by 3 members of the council, an item will be moved to a regularly scheduled council meeting. The first item is 10A. This is a citizen's petition titled Walk by Default, Setting on Pedestrian Traffic Lights in Flagstaff. And these public comments are regarding this. Okay, so I'm going to take public comment, and then we can have a discussion among council. So Kevin Hayes.
Hi, everyone. How are you? Thank you for the time today. My name is Kevin Hayes, and I'm here today to talk about a petition that we submitted called the Walk by Default petition. My e-bike is my primary vehicle around town, and as I've navigated around town, it's evident that our streets could be more accommodating for bikes and pedestrians. So today, I want to share a simple solution that could enhance safety for everyone at a minimal, if any, cost to the city. In most parts of our town, when traffic lights turn green, the pedestrian crossing light remains red. To activate it, you have to press the button before the light turns green in order to walk across that process. This is a challenge for bikers and pedestrians alike. This proposal syncs the pedestrian signal with the green light, making crossings smoother and safer. This change addresses multiple concerns. Bikers like me struggle at intersections. It's currently very difficult to use trails like the Foots trails and other trails that cross vehicle intersections because the crosswalks do not turn by default. So again, you have to stop, press the button, or get off the bike to continue at intersections. I've seen many pedestrians, especially visitors, encounter confusion when the light is green, but the sign says, the pedestrian sign says do not walk. For vehicles, these lights being defaulted to do not cross causes vehicles to disobey pedestrian safety. Any driver who has recently passed their driving test can attest that vehicles are required to yield to pedestrians regardless of that crossing sign, but subconsciously they see the do not cross and they refuse to let pedestrians and bikers cross. This is not safe and it needs to change. Additionally, we're looking at considering this leading pedestrian interval. The leading pedestrian interval, it grants pedestrians a brief head start before the vehicle receives a green light, less than a few seconds. This seemingly minor adjustment can reduce accidents, especially during right turns, without major costs to the city or the drivers. So when getting signatures for this petition, I was amazed at the number of drivers who also wanted these changes. These drivers said that they use that countdown blinking light to see when their stoplight turns red. So again, I truly believe that this is a simple adjustment that can have a profound impact. This will allow bikers, pedestrians, and vehicles an additional tool that they can use to hopefully make safer decisions to our extremely busy streets. So to conclude, I firmly believe these proposals can lead to safer streets. These are minor changes that immediately add up to safer, smoother journeys for all of us without a cost to the city.
Thank you, Kevin. I have a question, and maybe other council members do.
Yeah.
Did you have an opportunity to read our traffic engineer, Jeff Bauman, or traffic planner, Jeff Bauman's
I've seen
memo?
it. I haven't, no, the memo I haven't. I thought that the plan you were talking about. What memo is this?
So he submitted a memo, hold on this item.
Oh, great.
And it talks about both of these things that you talked about, and that the, in the downtown area, the demand, let's see, traffic signals. So in the downtown area, there's already the, by default.
Correct, yeah.
Walk
for
by
the
default.
The 4 around the downtown area, yeah, that's correct. But there's a significant all around the city that are not. And as a biker that I drive all through town, it is a burden for sure.
He does point that out. Was there a community that led you to start collecting signatures where you saw this
Yes.
work really well?
Yes, I am a part of the Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance, and I'm on the pedestrian and bicycle climate action team for them. And so when and I've only been there like a month or so, and when I first started, this was the idea, and he was like, yeah, we can get signatures for that. So they've been a part of helping make that happen.
Great. But are there other communities that you could point to that do this successfully?
In the other cities? I don't know of any other
And
cities.
it's
I
fine,
can
it's
look,
fine
yeah.
if you don't have to have suggestions. I was just going to make note and.
Yeah, we've done some looking, and some other people have said, like, I think Tempe, if you look at downtown Tempe, those lights seem to work. I mean, to be honest, I'm kind of shocked that it just isn't happened by default, because it's usually, like I said, seen. But I've seen around Tempe some of those, but I could look and get that information for you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Kevin? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
So next up, we have Adam Shimoni.
Hello, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council, city leadership, staff, members of the public. Hope everyone had a great summer. It's so good to be back in the chambers with you all. How exciting. Thank you for considering this citizens petition. I want to start by saying we are all pedestrians, right? And our roads infrastructure should put the pedestrian first. Future city projects do include pedestrian lead interval, LPI, specifically Lone Tree and Butler, I believe is going to have LPI integrated, which is very exciting. But there's so many streets around town that are not being addressed anytime soon. So for us to look at implementing LPI, especially where the regional plan prioritizes pedestrians, I think would be worthwhile as part of this fair. Downtown being one of those, right? So those places that already walk by default should really be LPI, which gives the pedestrian 3 to 7 seconds and the cyclist to cross or at least begin crossing. We know that about 50% of our crashes, when looking at our crash data report, are at intersections from that right turn. And so LPI plays a huge role in pedestrian and cycling safety. For a second, I want you to think about places that you've traveled to that you love. You know, what kind of places are those? Generally, those are places that you can walk and bike, and you can really sense a sense of place, right? Perhaps Telluride comes to mind. Perhaps other places across the nation come to mind. I recently went to Seattle and Bellingham, and I was so impressed by their bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. It was mind-blowing. They had lead pedestrian interval, they had separated bicycle infrastructure, and great public transit. It was extremely inspiring and also triggering. I was very triggered the entire time because I was like, we could do this here. And they had maybe 10 different versions of our separated bike lane pilot, not just the curbs. They had all sorts of options. But we need to catch up, right? So this is an easy win for us to consider. Making Flagstaff more walkable creates a sense of place, increases quality of life, and improves safety. Arizona has a car-centric culture, and Flagstaff has been impacted negatively by this type of thinking. We've come a long way in the past few years, but we still have a long way to go. Getting around town as a pedestrian is challenging, to say the least, and LPI and walk by default can really help kind of set the tone moving forward. And then on behalf of Flagstaff Biking Organization, FBO generally supports pedestrian infrastructure and safety efforts such as this, and we'll also hope that you consider more bicycle LPI type of infrastructure moving forward. Thank you for your consideration, and I'm hoping that there's 3 in support of this tonight. Thank you.
Did you practice that at home so that you were right on the 3 o'clock? 3? Nice, thank you. Dapper Dre.
Good to see everyone, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, staff. What do we got? We got the climate emergency, we got the big shift, and we got Vision Zero. So we got a lot of the talk. We don't got any of the walk. If you're not investing in pedestrian infrastructure in the places where pedestrians use it the most, and I know there's prioritization, you have 700 miles of city roads that streets needs to take care of, but it would also be nice if streets walked some of the streets and saw some of the places that are the most challenging not only for everybody, but certainly for the disabled community being freshly able to walk and able to bike again. The amount of stark differences that cars always get the right of way, cars always get the most funding, cars always get the most space on streets. And how are we gonna big shift if we don't incentivize pedestrians, if we don't incentivize bike riders, especially where you already have, like, I was out on First Friday Art Walk, you have thousands of people walking the street, and yet we still prioritize cars every single time. So I guess for staff, it's just the consideration of, it's okay to inconvenience cars sometimes, or sometimes just develop solely pedestrian forward infrastructure. We like to show the capability of the Foots Trail, right? We like to show the capability of a walkable downtown. And yet, post-COVID, all those sidewalks now have tables and chairs and planners that a person like me who's learning to freshly walk again has a lot of trouble negotiating. What do we love to hold up? We love to say, bring your dog downtown. What's dangerous for people who can't walk well, who can't see well, who can't negotiate these real thin sidewalks? It's tough for us, and yet we continue to say, bring your dogs, bring your families downtown, bring all these people downtown, and yet we have these things that are gonna kill us, that are gonna maim us, that are dangerous no matter how fast they're going. It isn't parked cars that are dangerous, it's moving cars, and yet we continue to prioritize just moving cars. And cars' argument are always gonna be for convenience and for time saving. And what we come to ask you and ask staff about is safety. Because when we aren't put first in design, we die. We get to spend 4 months of our time in the hospital. We get to do that. And if you're really concerned about developing and being good for all, which is what you say at the beginning of each of your meetings, you gotta start first pedestrian. You gotta consider that anything besides pedestrianism is alternative forms of transportation. Start thinking that way, and you'll start making that big shift.
Thank you. Oh, yes. Dre, I think.
Sorry, Dre, I had one quick question for you. So you mentioned, first of all, thank you for your comments. You mentioned the desire to see people like actually walk some of those areas that are the most challenging. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you name some of those intersections or areas that do present the greatest challenge?
LaRue and Birch, horrible for pedestrians, awful. You have two lanes traveling at the same rate, only 2 stop signs to cross from up LaRue, right, or down on LaRue, and people coming from San Francisco are going so fast, they're constantly turning from the far lane left, which is also another pedestrian crossing, awful. As far as sidewalks, you're probably the place where the most people walk are the worst sidewalks in towns. Pita Pit Corner, oh my God, talk about like traumatizing. When I was first learning to walk again, getting to that corner at Pita Pit was like, what's gonna happen? I'm gonna fall into the street. I'm probably gonna get another injury from this. Right outside of Pay and Take, that new patio is dope. The amount of sidewalk that you have to use, awful. Most of the tree wells in downtown Flagstaff are into pedestrian right-of-way for the vast majority of uneven spaces. A lot of the brick, pretty much all of San Francisco from where Mountain Sports is to where the Corner Tavern is. And the Corner Tavern, whew, oh man, that's like waiting for somebody to stumble out drunk and get hit on Route 66, like 100%. All the development of most streets is always like car projects are happening on the books like every year, 5 years. Downtown Improvement District hasn't been worked on since the mid-90s. Foots Trails was built 20 years ago. All these things that don't get reiterated until somebody dies or somebody gets hurt. And you plan parking in the way that it's, what if this many people all use parking, right? Like if you think about a Safeway, they build it for the maximum just in case. And then the vast majority of the averages is it's not full. Why can't we develop sidewalks like that? Develop for the maximum that can be used, the maximum comfort for people who are pedestrians, because that provides for everybody, and cars only usually provide for car owners, which statistics say is only 70% of Flagstaff. And yet, where the most people are walking is the thinnest amount of sidewalks you have to use. And you expect people to come and spend time and money in downtown Flagstaff? It's gonna happen for a while, but it's not gonna be a longevity. And another thing is street trees. It's getting super hot on those blacktops in the middle of downtown. You're not gonna wanna walk around and sit in the sun without some kind of shade. So I would consider another redevelopment where it's, again, putting pedestrians first, because many of this, tree wells in particular, almost all of those on Aspen are in some way built to either trip up people or not be accessible on a wheelchair, strollers, all these things. I'd love to invite all the council, and especially streets too, to come downtown, take one of my tours, and I'll show you all the places that are super tough for me and super tough for showing off our downtown. The places I tell all those stories about all our historic best places in town to tell the history of Flagstaff are the hardest places to tell stories. because there's no room for people to comfortably stand. There's no room for people to comfortably walk by each other because it's all taken up by parking and it's all taken up by cars moving through and not by people standing around, people eating food, people enjoying each other. So that's my sense. If you ever want to grab a coffee and go, and I can show you all the spots that have caused me trauma just because I had a big, extreme, life-changing trauma, and then there's all the things that you get to deal with after that. And this is like the eye-opening moment for me, where I've always been a bicycle advocate, and now it's like extreme pedestrianism. And you have to defend it. If you want to defend what is great about Flagstaff, defend pedestrians first. Don't always defend cars. Don't always make it about accessibility and the quickness and the sitting in traffic mentality. It has to be about, what do? We want to walk downtown. We want to walk from the farmer's market to Monte Vista. We want to walk around Heritage Square. And yet, it's always just cars, cars, cars. Nope, if you can't park, it's not worth it. If you can't park, it's not worth it. So that's my assessment. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. David Spence.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is David Spence. I own a home in Sunnyside, 2821 North Main. I'm here in support of the council putting this item on a future agenda. And I'd like to just start by asking people to close your eyes and think about how you characterize your city. We're the first dark sky city. We're a city in a large ponderosa pine forest. We're a city at the base of the San Francisco Peaks. We're the home to Northern Arizona University. Now, open your eyes and realize that we are not a bicycle-friendly city. If you Google 50 top bicycle-friendly cities in the United States, you won't find Flagstaff. And this agenda item, if you'll put it under future consideration, would go a substantial way to having Flagstaff get on that list. We already have the loop trail almost completed, a 40-mile loop around Flagstaff. We've got the Arizona Trail that comes up to Flagstaff and goes through on 2 different routes as it goes north or south. And there are a lot of good things about Flagstaff for bicyclists and pedestrians, but this agenda item would go a long way. And I want to just briefly tell you a true story. 20 years ago, I was in front of the downtown post office, and I saw a bicycle with a bob trailer and a flag on the back that said, non-directed kidney donations, ask me about it. So I waited for this bicyclist to come out of the post office, and we had a 45-minute conversation. He was riding cross-country. He chose to come through Flagstaff to raise awareness about non-directed kidney donations. And after talking with him for 45 minutes, I am a physician, so I stood there and I realized, why didn't I ever think about donating a kidney? I donated blood. I've been on the bone marrow donor list, but I'd never given a kidney. So I took his encouragement and I went ahead and I was the first non-directed kidney donor in Arizona as a result of a chance encounter with a cross-country bicyclist. So I encourage you to put Flagstaff on the map for long-distance cycling as well as local. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would add that those are the kinds of interactions that you have when you have pedestrians, when you have people meeting each other on the sidewalk. So thank you for donating your kidney. All right, council. Do we have 3 council members who would like to see this move forward and be placed on an upcoming agenda?
Can I just make a quick comment?
Yes, you may.
A lot of the stuff our staff is already doing. For instance, I forget what it's called, but where you give the bicyclist or pedestrian a head start across the intersection, that's being incorporated on Butler at Beaver, at San Francisco, at Lone Tree. And so some of these things are already being done, so I guess it would probably make some sense to have a staff presentation on what they're doing and what can be done, and you know, what part of this makes sense, what parts of it don't make sense. Parts of it do make sense.
All right, so I believe council is unanimous in its desire to have this put on an upcoming agenda. So moving down now to item number 10B, future agenda item request, a request by Councilmember Matthews to place on a future agenda a discussion about a sound study regarding the pickleball courts at Bushmaster Park. Councilmember Matthews, well, let me take public comment and then have you discuss why you wanted to have this on the agenda. So first up, we have Audria Smith.
Yay, sound study. Thank you to Council Member Matthews for making this motion to have an earnest discussion for a sound study, for recognizing that there may be still important work to do. Thank you, Vice Mayor, for expressing your interest in the sound science and suggesting it. Thank you, Councilmember McCarthy and Councilmember House, for your encouraging positive votes last week. It was very helpful. I hope that you all took a look at the presentation I handed to you all last week, created by Forest Highlands by the firm Spendarian and Willis Acoustics and Noise Control. It's a fine example of a qualified independent sound engineer's work. You could see that it's no small marbles, that the sound of this simple game packs a big punch. And you did take a listen to the latest discussion on NPR's program 1A that I emailed you all last week about pickleball and its growing popularity and equally growing issues. I had a rare pleasure just last night, the last day of the Labor Day weekend. I stepped out of my studio around 8 or 8:30 and noticed peace, calm, and darkness. The stadium lights at the courts were dark, and there was zero sound but the crickets. And of course, the whitewash of distant sound from Route 66 and the freeway that many of us hear. With absolute joy, I gathered my dog and cats and a book and plopped on my fabulous, mostly unused sofa under my mostly unused patio and spent a glorious hour and a half before I went to bed. So I'm here to tell you that I am really pleased and support that you would consider hiring a firm that can conduct an independent study that offers sound guidelines to follow to implement a good and fair plan for everyone concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kathleen Day.
Hello, good evening, and thank you. You know, we've all heard about the unique and disruptive noise on residential areas, and it's been stated in numerous publications, the New York Times, NPR, documented studies by sound experts, but probably most importantly by the lived experience of those that surround Bushmaster. So I also urge you to take seriously these concerns of the homeowners, just as Forest Highlands took seriously the concerns of their community, despite the fact of the significant discrepancy in wealth and power and privilege that surrounds Bushmaster. So please include this important conversation on a future agenda ensuring you fully hear and consider the well-being, the lived experiences of those who are going to be most impacted by the decisions you make on this contentious issue. I also ask, I guess I'm not supposed to tag on, and maybe I have to do a separate petition, but that we designate signage and enforcement to also preserve some usage of the basketball courts by people that want to play basketball, especially the children. I often come across in the evening, there's kids playing on all 4 courts, and they set up pickleball right in the middle of their games. And it's just unrealistic to think that 9-year-olds are going to get the pickleball people off. There's designated time set aside from tennis courts and basketball for pickleball. Let's designate time in the tennis courts and basketball for tennis and basketball, especially for the children, silo homes and in that area. It's so important that they have a time for free play. And they're not structured games. You know, 9-year-olds, right? They're going to run and play basketball for 15 minutes, then they're going to play tag, then someone's going to throw something, they're going to go off the court, then they're going to come back on. You know, and so to think that every time they step away, a pickleball game is going to happen, it's just not fair. So these are important issues, and I think the sound, the access, they're just fair play of how we live in community, and I ask you to consider that. And then, by the way, I'm just recovering from a basketball accident on the corner of when you come off the bike trail at Cedar and West. The electric gate was off right at the intersection. I got thrown into oncoming traffic. It's also not a safe crosswalk for pedestrians and cyclists, and there's lots of people, including all those school kids, high school kids that are there. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Matthews, do you have anything that you would like to say or share with council before they ask any questions or make any comments?
Sure, Mayor, thank you. And I think, at least from comments we've all made in the past, we have some agreement. And being 8 months on this position, I've came to realize how difficult it is to sometimes come to a conclusion. You're not going to make everybody happy 100% of the time, probably never. But with pickleball, it is a very fast-growing sport, and there's so much we don't know about it. I don't know of any of us that are sitting up here play it. So we've relied on the input from our community and being sensitive to both the homeowners and the athletes. And I just think that for us to do a sound study to really get some facts that are outside of emotional comments would be very helpful. And I know I've read several different alternative solutions that it's not all or nothing. I have a neighbor who plays pickleball, and at night they use a softer paddle and a softer ball. I know that we here have talked about restricting hours of play and maybe location. And so I think that with a sound study, we could make a more informed decision. I don't know that we'll get closer to a more popular vote, but at least a sound study would give us more documented evidence on what we're voting on. You know, I do appreciate, and I'm very sensitive to the passions of people wanting to get out and play and enjoy the fresh air and also quality of life for the people who live around there. I know pickleball has been being played for the last 3 years, and I don't know that we've had any complaints, so I think that there's solutions out there. It's not an all or nothing if we do it right, and I think the sound study is a responsible step forward, so we're considering all aspects that we may not have been told or are aware of yet. So,
Thank you. And just a reminder, this is not to decide to do a sound study. This is just to put the question on an upcoming agenda. So do council members have comments or questions? Councilmember McCarthy.
Well, you're probably not surprised that I'm very supportive, and I think Ms. Matthews made a good point. This isn't an all or nothing. I mean, this may say we need to put up a 60-foot sound wall, and it'll cost $2 million. Or it may be that we say that based on the analysis that we only allow soft paddles and soft balls, which won't cost the city anything. So there's a whole range of things that could or might not be appropriate. So to have a study makes total sense to me. I think, you know, if we decided, council decided to put pickleball courts in this location, which I didn't support because I think pickleball is great, but it's a bad location. But at the very least, as a compromise, we need to do a sound analysis study. I feel very strongly about it. Thank you.
Councilmember Harris, then Vice Mayor.
I'm in support of having a discussion, but as I cautioned the council once before on another issue, is that oftentimes when you come back with a discussion, the public thinks that you're overturning or overriding the decision that you made, and I'm not in favor of that. I think I'm more in favor of working with our staff. They're professionals. I think they can help us make good decisions about what we're doing with this project. And I don't want the public to walk away thinking that, oh, now they're not going to build pickleball courts. And so that's my caution and that's my concern. And so I'm not going to support that.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, just to follow up on that real quickly, I think we avoided the worst potential for that problem last week by parsing this out and getting to a new conversation. Just on that topic, I'm supportive of doing everything we can and having the conversations we need to and getting the analysis done to make the neighborhood as copacetic with pickleball as possible. I do wonder, I mean, I'll support this moving forward for a variety of reasons, but I do wonder if we're talking about the same thing. I'm not sure we need a sound study. I would argue that we know that pickleball is noisy. And we don't necessarily need an analysis or a scientific cudgel to drive that point home. The question is really, how do we mitigate the negative impacts of pickleball on the neighborhood? So I would just like to further parse those out and make sure that we're spending our money and our time and our city and staff resources on the solution we're looking for and not idle analysis. When I think we're probably all ready to acknowledge the conclusion that would become from a consultant, which is, yeah, pickleball can be noisy. The other part of it is, and you know this very well, Councilmember McCarthy, sound studies can get really nitpicky and very complicated in terms of peak hours, peak volumes, decibel levels, what are we measuring, A or B, and these, you know, if this gets too complicated and too scientific, it's just going to become useless fodder for anybody trying to make any argument. So while I'm supportive in spirit of trying to figure out the best way to mitigate the impact of pickleball on Bushmaster Park neighborhood, I don't know that, it seems to me that issuing a sound study might be too prescriptive and beside the point.
Sure.
Actually, I agree. I think what we should do is have a discussion about it, and then at that point, decide if we want to hire a consultant or not. To speak really openly and honestly, we had a noise issue on from patio bars, and we hired a consultant. And I'll just be honest, it was a waste of money. It didn't accomplish anything. They made conclusions with no backup, no rationale for it, and I don't want to see that happen again. But I do think we need to have a discussion about, there are some options like soft balls, soft paddles. Maybe we can put in some reasonably priced sound walls or whatever. But I don't know that we need some PhD consultant to lead us down that path. But we do need to have the discussion ourselves. Thank you.
Councilmember Matthews.
Thank you, Mayor. And I agree with Vice Mayor and Councilmember McCarthy. My goal in suggesting this sound study was in anticipation, and maybe the cost is not necessary if we've already read, like I mentioned, soft paddles, soft balls, sound walls. Maybe we just have that discussion to implement those. We talked about sound walls early on, and we kind of passed over it. But my goal was to come up, have somebody tell us, or if we already think we know it, but somebody to tell us, well, if you did this, this, and this, you could mitigate the impact to the neighborhood. And again, I'll mention that pickleball's been played there for the last 3 years, and I know the big concern is, well, it's a growing sport, so more pickleball will be played, but we can control that with hours and usage and stuff. So like Councilmember McCarthy, I think it does need to be discussed because I think we left some stuff on the table when we approved it, and I agree with Councilmember Harris that I'm not in favor of overturning our decision, but I think we left some stuff on the table that we should have discussed then, and now we can discuss to say, yes, but because we're in this neighborhood, we need to also do these offsetting procedures, requirements, restrictions, monitoring, what all those things can be, and to have a really good conversation with our Parks and Recs Department and just all come to an agreement on what we can do to make it palatable for everybody.
Thank you. And I see our city attorney's microphone is red.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As we've discussed in the past, the wording of fairs is very specific, and what I'm hearing discussed up here is, as you worded it, Vice Mayor, if I can use your words, mitigation of the impacts of sound of pickleball near Bushmaster Park. That's not what's on the fair before you tonight. If that's the direction that you're looking to go, what I would suggest is not moving forward with the fair as it's written tonight. And I hate to say this, but asking for a different fair to mitigate the impacts of sound and noise from pickleball at Bushmaster Park that way.
Yes.
Sterling, the words say sound study. Council can do a sound study. The PhD could do a sound study. There's 100 different ways this so-called sound study should be. So I don't know that we need to interpret that phrase that rigorously because I don't think it was meant that way. I think a sound study by council would be a sound study.
I would not disagree, Councilmember McCarthy, but unfortunately I don't see anything in here about mitigating the impacts of noise on, from pickleball at Bushmaster Park. I know what's being discussed, and I'm sorry to split hairs that way, but it's a very high-profile item, and for that reason, I think the most precise language and the most precise fare would probably be best. And Councilmember Matthews, no offense, I think that's, you took from the petition a sound study, but I think what you have expressed as, a couple of members of council tonight, not a majority, is more along the lines of where you all would like to go as far as having a discussion on mitigating impacts. And I'm just suggesting some language that may help you do that better when someone may come back and say, that's not what the fair was about.
Well, Mayor, two comments. I think when we say we're going to do a sound study, it's implicit in that implies that you might do something about it. We're not going to do a sound study just for the hell of it. My other comment is maybe it would make sense that this come back next week with more precise wording, but if I think I will support this fair, but if it fails, I'll come back with something with carefully worded phrasing.
Would we be prevented from supporting this fair and then broadening the discussion when it's on the agenda?
Yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make. If you support this fair moves forward.
Then we can only discuss this.
That's what, yeah, and that's why it would make more sense if you wanted to discuss mitigation of impacts of noise from pickleball at Bushmaster, to state it that way. That way there are no questions about what council is going to do.
I bet we'll save time in the end. This will be more efficient.
Could we, could this be on the agenda next week? A new fair item?
If I may, Mayor, Council, there's a couple avenues here. The Fair Avenue, which proves time and time again to be very rigid and very clunky. And at the upcoming retreat, we will be making some suggestions. But I don't want to get beyond the conversation now. Another avenue is just to have me put something on the agenda, which I'm quite happy to do. I've heard enough commentary to give me some idea of what it is you want to talk about, and we'll do it. We'll just put it on the agenda. We can go through this clunky, rigid fair process, and we will have another agenda item, which I will place on the agenda, that speaks to potential sound mitigation of pickleball courts at Bushmaster Park. And Sterling, I hope I'm not overstepping boundaries here.
Mayor and council, if I may, I'm really grateful the city manager spoke up. I didn't want to throw that on him to say that was his option, but everybody knows it's under the charter that he can do that, and I'm really glad to hear that he's suggested that.
Well, my comment is if the city manager is willing to commit to that, that satisfies me.
Me as well. And I think that I'm seeing nods that everyone is in support of a discussion about how to mitigate the sound impacts.
Yes, what I can't commit to is how quickly we can get it to you. Rest assured, we will do everything possible to do just that. Would like to confer with staff as well, but coming your way. Thank you.
Thank you. So then we can just move on from this fair item, right? Or should I still ask for a show of hands?
As the manager referred to it as a clunky process, technically, because it's here and was not withdrawn before the meeting, you would need to ask if there are still those that support a sound study. It is rigid.
Council, are there 3 additional council members who are in support of placing a discussion about a sound study on an upcoming agenda? All right. And you understand why? Okay. All right. So we are moving on then to 10C. Fair item, request by Vice Mayor Aslan to place on a future agenda a discussion about developing court amenities for city parks, specifically basketball and bank shot. And we have no public comment on this, so take it away, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I think the fair language speaks for itself. I'm not really sure I need to say more or go hard into selling it right now. There's been a lot of bandwidth taken up by pickleball this past season, this past year. I don't want to forget about the other sports that we're trying to provide amenities for our children in our neighborhoods. And I think we're a little bit behind on getting those up and running and operational and maintained and resourced in certain neighborhoods, including but not limited to Ponderosa Trails Park, which for full transparency, is the place where I live. But that's just one of the neighborhoods where I know the need is there, and that the desire to have that need fulfilled is very strong throughout the neighborhood. I'm sure it's a similar story elsewhere too. We haven't had an accounting of exactly what our sports amenities are in our various neighborhood parks. For at least several years, I can't recall having done that during my 5.5 years on council. I think it might just be good housekeeping for us to take a look at all of that and have some conversations about where we can find some money in the couch cushions and get these things up and in use where we know they're needed and desired.
Thank you. I have a question for staff, I guess specifically Sterling. Could we combine a discussion of this with an update from pros on their near-term plans for amenities in parks?
So you're talking about combining C and D? Oh, no, sorry, not C and D. Never mind, I apologize. Yes, you could. That's the way the fair is worded. I'm looking at the two-part fair. Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, I'm the council liaison to pros, and I had a conversation with pros when I took my tour. And then after my tour, we had a Zoom meeting during our break. And we talked a lot about bank shot and basketball courts. And how I directed staff, because I really think it's important for staff to look at their budget and look at how this project would fit into the priority budgeting process. And since we're getting ready to start that process again, this would be a perfect opportunity for them to do that. And furthermore, I don't supervise staff, but when I did supervise staff, it was my opinion that I hire good people and then I encourage them to do the things that are within their job description, and then I back away. And so I explained this to pro staff. And so for that reason, I don't particularly think that this should be a council decision. I think that staff should bring this forward in the budgeting process and let us know how important this is to the community, because they have that information. Thank you.
Councilmember McCarthy.
Well, two comments. I think this fair might have the same problem of the previous fair, that it's too narrow. For instance, I've heard a lot of discussion about we need girls' softball courts. And maybe we need funding for, and I'm not kidding, pickleball courts at Thorpe Park. So to limit this to courts amenities, specifically basketball, seems very narrow.
And bank shot.
And bank shot, yeah, whatever that is. My point is that it's so narrow that maybe it would be better to have this in the context of where do we want new pickleball courts, where do we want girls softball courts, what other amenities do we want, as opposed to limiting it to just basketball and bank shots and courts.
How about we have a discussion with staff on, I know that they have a plan for future amenities. How about we have a discussion with staff about their plan, and then we can also bring additional information that we have that we've heard from the public and just talk about it at an upcoming.
We can do that, and we'd be glad to do that. And a similar comment to the one I made earlier, allow us to come back and let you know when that is. We'll want to consult with staff and see how long it will take for them to prepare for that conversation. And I think we've heard enough tidbits from this fair item to give us a clue as to where the talking points may lie, so thank you.
Thanks. So for the clunky part of the process, do we have 3 additional council members who would like to have a discussion about developing court amenities, specifically basketball and bank shot, along with the presentation from staff about their plans?
Well,
No, that is the fair. To
Yeah.
place on a future agenda item a discussion about developing court amenities for city parks, specifically basketball and bank shot. Staff has said that it would be appropriate to have that conversation within the bigger context of having pros come to us and talk about their strategic plan.
And I think it's key that the city manager's indicated he would do that through his authority under the charter to bring that to you as a council. So,
But we still need to vote on,
and
or
it's just
thumbs
whether
up
or
or
not there's
down.
a support to move forward with this more limited discussion. That's correct.
Did you have something, Vice Mayor?
I do. You know, I knew what I was doing when I worded this. I wrote it out very carefully, and I stand by it. I see where this is going, and I'm very appreciative that we're going to have a little bit of a larger accounting about our amenities in general. But I came forward with this fair specifically to champion and highlight the need for more basketball and to be an advocate for bank shot court amenities where we have basketball. I think those two things are important. I am singling them out, and I would appreciate your support in letting that conversation move forward. And I hope we can all easily digest that, knowing that it's going to be synchronized with a larger conversation that's not exclusive to other resources that we could be throwing at pros.
We can have both of these conversations at the same time, and it's about amenities at our parks and the strategic plan that PROS has regarding what they're planning to develop moving forward.
It would take the three to move this specific fair forward.
Correct.
But I think you've heard from your city manager, he's going to have the broader discussion on the other
Correct.
items as well.
And if we support this, we could have it on the same night as part of the same discussion. So, do we have 3 additional council members who will support moving this fair forward? And we need one in addition.
No, just 3. Him and 2.
Including,
Vice Mayor
okay.
and 2 more, yes.
All right. So we're good. All right, moving down to D. A request by Vice Mayor Aslan to place on a future agenda a discussion about local breweries and increasing the square footage for retail space in light industrial zones.
Again, I'll be brief. I think this rather speaks for itself. Without getting too specific, just generally, I believe Flagstaff likes to think of itself as a brewery-friendly community. I'm learning that there's a bunch of red tape and there's things standing in the way of actual breweries being able to realize the potential they'd like to realize. And I think I think these requests are very reasonable. I think it's kind of low-hanging fruit. I think it's doable. The only thing I don't want to have happen is for a solution to this problem to unintentionally create issues and headaches elsewhere. Always a danger when we're talking about popping open the hood of our zoning code and tinkering. So want to be careful of that, but at the same time, I would like to see some of these easy fixes, in my opinion, move forward as expediently as possible, because there's no reason why our breweries should have to wait to enjoy their full potential. And the wording here is pretty specific. Again, it may end up being couched in terms of a larger conversation. I know that when we do zoning code amendments, we like to kind of do a bunch of them at once. But at the same time, this is really just a quick housekeeping matter, in my opinion. I'd love to see it move forward.
Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you. I think I'll support this, but when we do have the discussion, we should talk about if we're compromising light industrial zones, which we don't have a lot of, and that should be part of the discussion. Well, so with that understanding, I'll support it.
Additional comments, questions? Councilmember House.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to note that part of why I am wanting to support this as well is from the very thing that I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting in terms of one of the discussions that I was able to sit in on at the league conference was talking a lot about cultural engagement, and one of the primary examples was actually wineries in a particular town as a source of that cultural economy and cultural engagement. So I see strong parallels here with that conversation, and that's why I'm looking forward to supporting moving this forward. Thank you.
All right, we've got the support to move it forward. All right, looking at any additional public participation, I see none. So we'll move down to item number 12, informational items, 2 from mayor, council, and staff, and future agenda item requests. Let's start with Councilmember McCarthy.
I've been first, I've been last, but I always harvest some. Neil Young. I don't have anything else tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, just 5 more fairs. No, nothing further from me this evening.
Councilmember Sweet.
Nothing tonight.
Councilmember Harris.
Nothing.
Councilmember House.
So I don't know that this rises to the level of a fair, but in the conversation that we had about being a walkable community and pedestrian-friendly and bike-friendly, I took a moment to look up the Walk-Friendly Communities designation and noticed that we are recognized as a bronze level, but it goes from bronze to platinum. And so I just like to talk about what it takes to move up those levels. If we even just focused on what it would take to move to the next level, which would be silver, or just understanding what that designation actually means and how we move up those levels, I think it's a conversation worth having, particularly with some of the conversations that we've had in recent weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember House. Staff got that. Councilmember Matthews.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a reminder, there's an Indigenous Commission meeting tomorrow that I'm the liaison for, and also for those of you who were not on the Zoom call with Econa, today was part 1, a 3-part series where they talked about the findings from a very in-depth study of the impacts to northern Arizona, and today was housing. It was very sobering, very scary. And I am looking forward to elevating the conversation of how we are going to tackle this crisis, and it's not a one solution, one problem, one solution answer. I asked Gail from Econa if we do have the PowerPoint, but if she could share the taped video because the narrative was very informative, and I encourage anyone listening and the rest of the council to listen to it because there was some great information. As you know, Mayor, you were on there. Thank you.
Thank you. Apparently, Councilmember McCarthy thought of something that he would like to say.
Would you like me to be quick? This is a follow-up to the comment of Ms. House. My wife uses a wheelchair, and I can tell you navigating downtown Flagstaff is extremely difficult. Basically, we don't go down there with her wheelchair. We go to places, other places. There's the tree wells are, a challenge to a wheelchair. There's seating on the sidewalks. I mean, sidewalks are supposed to be for walking, but we've made them into patios in effect. So I definitely think this is an issue that a couple people have brought up tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you for indulging me.
Well, that was a very, very important point. But regardless, I would have indulged you. I want to second the emphasis on the Econa, the whole strategic plan, and they're breaking it down into sections of the strategic plan to present to the public. And if it's possible, I would love to have a presentation to council so that the public would be able to hear that information as well, if that fits into our schedule moving forward. And City Manager, do you have anything?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. On the last item you just mentioned first, we actually have been in communication with Econa today to talk about a presentation of that to the council. And there's a willingness to do that. We likely will bring in the consultant to prepare that, to have the consultant assist in that presentation. It could be a fairly lengthy presentation, but I think an important one. The comeback from Econa was, do we wait for a joint meeting between the council and the Board of Supervisors? And that's something to consider. We don't have to make that decision right now. We can talk about this internally, but that is a thought to consider, is if we want to do this during a joint meeting. We'll circle back on that. With respect, I wanted to mention to you to please, if it's not already on your calendar, to ink in on your calendar October 12th. It's a Thursday for your next retreat. It will be facilitated. Today we met to start populating the agenda for that retreat. Two items that are on that agenda have already been mentioned tonight. The first being the reclaimed water, wastewater rate study. It will not be half a day. I already corrected Erin Young on that, and she's aware. Likely 1.5 to 2 hours on that. These retreats, we like to keep it mixed and get as much mileage as we can out of your time. So that will be on the agenda, but it will not be a half-day item. The second is what I just referenced. We will be bringing forward the discussion of the fair process. I don't want to get into unnecessary details right now. There's a lot of history behind the fair process and why it exists. And I think some of the bases for the historic reasons for having the fair process should be on the table, not to undo it, but to maybe revise it, and that will be our suggestion. We don't want it to be clunky, nor do we want it to be rigid. We want to keep our attorney happy with council's discussion on what is slated on the agenda, and that's very, very important, and Sterling can give you all the reasons why. But we also want it to be a process that works for the council. Allow us to come forward with a couple of recommendations. That'll be a talk at the retreat. Why is it coming to you? Because this is embodied in the city council procedures. This is a council-derived policy regarding procedure, and so it resides with you. It is not in our city code. It's not in the charter. It is within your rules of procedure. So we'll be bringing that forward for your discussion, along with one or two other things. October 12th, and I think that's all I had. Thank you for giving me a little bit of time here.
Thank you. All right. I believe that we are finished, so we're adjourned.